Chapter 159. Su Xiaowan, Save Me. Su Wan had just exited from the number 2 warehouse and was about to check the task list when the door of number 2 execution room was suddenly pushed open from the outside. Ding Jujia rushed in and threw herself into Su Wan's arms regardless of anything. Fortunately, Su Wan dodged quickly and Ding Jujia pounced on empty air. Su Xiaowan, Wanwan. Ding Jujia looked at Su Wan with a wronged expression. Ever since she found out that Su Wan could also smile, Ding Jujia felt that it was necessary to communicate with comrade Su Wan and promote the friendship between colleagues. What's the matter? Faced with Ding Jujia's sudden enthusiasm, Su Wan could only accept her helplessness. Wanwan. Ding Jujia pitifully looked at Su Wan with her lowly face. You have to save me. Only you can help me. Sure enough, there must be a request when one is unaccountably solicitous. What is it? Although Su Wan wasn't familiar with the people in the department, her character wasn't cold. Help me with a task. Ding Jujia opened her communicator and directly pulled out a task. This baby has completed this task 3 times. 3 times. Su Xiaowan, can you do it? This is the most difficult female lead I've ever seen. I beg you to help me eliminate her. No, help me convert her. This baby has already used all the techniques I have, snatched her man and killed her close friend. Your mother, in the end, she's still willing to block the knife for me. I'm really drunk. I'm really afraid that if I continue to do this task, one day, I'll be converted by her. Hearing Ding Jujia's words, Su Wan's face also flashed with a hint of playfulness. How powerful was the female lead that could force Ding Jujia to this state? This woman's holy aura is definitely max tilde Su Xiaowan, Wanwan, just agree. Ding Jujia saw that Su Wan seemed to be somewhat moved and immediately blinked her big eyes pitifully. Okay, send the task to me. I'll take a look. If there's a suitable identity, I'll take it. Yes, there's definitely a suitable role for you. Seeing that Su Wan agreed, Ding Jujia immediately excitedly sent the mission information to Su Wan's communicator. Ding Jujia was also very clear about Su Wan's mission requirements. First, the character's identity must be an ex-girlfriend. Second, before entering the mission, the character cannot have an overly intimate relationship with anyone in the original world. In Ding Jujia's eyes, such a request was simply ridiculous. Fortunately, there was an important storyline character in this world that completely fulfilled these 2 requirements. Roughly skimming through the plot, Su Wan nodded. Okay, I'll accept this mission. Thank you. Ding Jujia stepped forward and tiptoed, wanting to kiss Su Wan's face. In the end, Su Wan dodged it again. Ding Jujia, sob. I feel like Su Wan dislikes me. Please comfort me. Seeing that Su Wan had accepted the mission and entered the connection cabin, Ding Jujia was still standing in the number 2 passage room, reluctant to part. Ari, when can I do missions here? It was said that number 2 was much more comfortable than number 3. Just as Ding Jujia was looking at the connection pod with envy, her communicator's locator suddenly began to flicker. Oh my, the male god finally did a mission. Ding Jujia immediately turned on the locator's plane lock function excitedly, and then there was no then. Looking at Su Wan's connection pod, Ding Jujia looked at the plane signal on her locator with a look of astonishment. The male god entered the mission world. That world was originally her mission, but just now, she transferred it to Su Wan. Ding Jujia, no one persuade me, let me cry quietly for a while. Mission world. Su Wan's consciousness was linked to the body of the mission target. For a moment, her consciousness was blurred and she only felt cold all over. It's so cold. She unconsciously murmured. At this time, a warm body suddenly hugged her tightly. Xiao Wan, you bear with it will be fine after tonight. The voice was a weak female voice, very light and pleasant to listen to. Su Wan slowly opened her eyes. It was pitch black in front of her, and she could only see the vague outline beside her in the haze. This is Sister Yunuor? Su Wan called out softly. Hearing her voice, Yang Yunuor couldn't help but look down at the person in her arms. I'm here, Xiao Wan, what's wrong? It's nothing, it's still a little cold. Su Wan replied in a low voice. She just wanted to confirm if the person who was hugging her in the cold night was the female lead. Still cold. When Yang Yunuo heard Su Wan's words, she couldn't help but let go of her hands and directly took off the palace-made uniform on her body. For you. She wrapped Su Wan's whole body with her robe, and then opened her arms to hold Su Wn tightly in her arms. On a cold night, on a quiet and remote palace road, two young palace maids knelt on the imperial road, quietly hugging each other. Okay, it's not cold like this. Yang Yunuo whispered to herself, her tone was still so soft. It was indeed a lot warmer. Su Wn gently closed her eyes and began to sort out the plot of this world. The female lead of this world was Yang Yunuo, who was next to her. Yang Yunuo was not called Yang Yunuo. She was originally just a maid of Jinsu's Yang family. It coincided with the imperial palace's triennial selection of palace family members to enter the palace. The Yang family originally had 2 places, but the Yang family's daughter was unwilling to enter the palace. Later, Master Yang bribed the officials in charge of the selection of palace family members and sent his unfavored concubine daughter, Yang Yuqing, and the female lead, who changed her name to Yang Yunuo, into the palace. The new palace family members who entered the palace were only 13 years old, which was the age where they were ignorant of worldly affairs. Everyone was uniformly arranged to be in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, under the unified management and guidance of the nanny in charge. In a brand new and unfamiliar environment, although Yang Yuqing and Yang Yunuo were not biological sisters, they still depended on each other. The relationship between the two people was closer than that of biological sisters. A year later, Yang Yuqing and Yang Yunuo were assigned to different places by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Because Yang Yunuo had been a maid since she was a child, her needlework and embroidery were very outstanding, so she was directly sent to the Shangfu Bureau. She was usually responsible for the selection of embroidery patterns, the rotation of the palace clothes for the 4 seasons, and other work. Yang Yuqing, who had not been favored in the Yang family since she was a child, was directly sent to the Shangfu Bureau because she was eloquent and good at coaxing people. Then, she was arranged to serve a nobleman who had just entered the palace. The lives of the 2 sisters began to take a turn at this time. Yang Yunuo had a docile personality. She had been particularly gentle, honest, and willing to help others since she was a child. In the Shangfu Bureau, the competition between the new and old palace maids was very fierce. Because Yunuo was obedient and diligent, she was highly regarded by Master Liao in the bureau, which brought her a lot of trouble. At this time, Yang Yunuo, who was in deep trouble, received help from another palace maid. This palace maid was Su Wan, who entered the palace with her. Su Wan was from the capital and her family was originally a scholarly family. How could it be that when it reached her father's generation, because old man Su was addicted to gambling, his family declined and he also owed others a huge amount of money? Unable to repay, her father had no choice but to sell her into the palace. Su Wan and Yang Yunuo were assigned to the Shangfu Bureau together. The 2 people did not have any intersection at first, but Su Wan couldn't bear to see others always bullying Yang Yunuo, and Yang Yunuo was honest and always silently enduring, so Su Wan began to help Yang Yunuo. When she was bullied, she helped her fight back together. Later, the 2 people slowly became very good sisters. After Su Wan became friends with Yang Yunuo, she told Yang Yunuo about her life experience and worries. It turned out that before the Su family declined, Father Su had set a marriage for Su Wan. After the Su family declined, the marriage was no longer mentioned. Who knew that after Su Wan entered the palace, she would accidentally meet her fiancé, Shen Shengbei. The Shen family was also a rising star in the capital. Chen Shengbei had just turned 16 years old and entered the palace to become a royal guard as soon as he reached adulthood. It could be said that his future was limitless. The 2 people were childhood sweethearts when they were young. Although they hadn't seen each other for many years, by chance, Chen Shengbei met someone from the Shangfu Bureau when he was patrolling in the imperial city. He recognized Su Wan's jade pendant in the crowd, and later, he asked someone to send a letter to Su Wan. Su Wan, who received the letter, was naturally very happy. She also wrote a reply to Chen Shengbei, but she couldn't find someone who could help her deliver the letter. At this time, Yang Yunuo remembered Yang Yuqing. Yang Yuqing was assigned to Liu Guiren's palace as a servant. Liu Guiren was favored at this time, and Yang Yuqing was appreciated by Liu Guiren because of her eloquence. As the saying goes, when a man achieves the Tao, his chickens and dogs also rise to heaven. When Liu Guiren was favored, the palace servants in her palace also followed suit. Yang Yunuo introduced Su Wan to Yang Yuqing, and the three people immediately became sworn sisters. According to age, Yang Yunuo was the elder sister, Yang Yuqing was the second sister, and Su Wan was the youngest third sister. Yang Yuqing was naturally very attentive in doing things for her third sister, so Su Wan began to write letters to Chen Shengbei. Originally, the two people had agreed that when Su Wan entered the palace for 3 years, when it was time to leave the palace, Chen Shengbei would spend money to find someone to let her leave the palace and tie the knot with him. But in the second year after Su Wan entered the palace, Yang Yuqing was visited by the emperor and was later conferred the title of beauty. Yang Yuqing, who had an unstable foundation in the palace, naturally wanted to find a loyal and reliable candidate for her own use. She originally took a fancy to Yang Yunuo, but Yang Yunuo was too honest. Yang Yuqing, who had long learned how to survive in the palace from Liu Guiren, finally chose Su Wan. After Su Wan followed Yang Yuqing, she saw Yang Yuqing being favored step by step, from beauty to concubine. She received all the favor and also received very rich rewards. Those precious snow satin, ginseng, and emerald pearls, which one of them wasn't hard to find? Slowly, Su Wan's heart also began to change. She had seen the current emperor in Yang Yuqing's palace. A young and handsome emperor, who wouldn't be tempted? Because of her own thoughts, Su Wan began to alienate Chen Shengbei. She never read or replied to Chen Shengbei's letters, and she even wrote a heartless letter to Yang Yunuo to help her hand it over to Chen Shengbei. At this time, Yang Yunuo had already gained a foothold in the Shangfu bureau. She had also seen Chen Shengbei several times and knew that he was a good man who was infatuated with love. In fear that Chen Shengbei would be sad, Yang Yunuo left Su Wan's heartless letter. She imitated Su Wan's notes and continued to communicate with Chen Shengbei for more than a year. In the 3rd year of entering the palace, Chen Shengbei had been promoted to the chief guard. He finally had the opportunity to patrol the palace at night. It was at that time that he met Su Wan again and was even rejected by Su Wan. At this time, Chen Shengbei knew that the person who had been communicating with him for more than a year turned out to be Yang Yunuo. Chen Shengbei was disappointed with Su Wan's heartlessness. At the same time, he became good friends with Yang Yunuo because of her kindness, and even slowly fell in love with Yang Yunuo. At this time, Su Wan was deliberately approaching the emperor, but who was Yang Yuqing? When she was still the steward of Liu Guiren's palace maid, she used her master's shoulder to climb onto the dragon bed. Now, she naturally wouldn't let herself repeat Liu Guiren's mistakes, so Su Wan's dream of becoming an imperial concubine naturally fell through. She was even framed by another female official in the palace. After being beaten, she was dragged to the Shinjaku to do the dirtiest and most tiring things. Once she woke up from her dream, Su Wan began to regret her past. She thought that she would be trapped in the dark Shinjaku for the rest of her life. Who knew that at this time, Yang Yunuo would stand up for her? Yang Yunuo used all her monthly salary and even asked Chen Shengbei to help. The two of them used silver to finally rescue Su Wan from the Shinjaku and arranged for her to work in the Shongshu Bureau. The work in the Shongshu Bureau was very easy. Su Wan was only responsible for lighting the lamps and even serving His Majesty and the Empress as they bathed and changed clothes. This was another good opportunity for Su Wan to get close to His Majesty. But at this time, Su Wan had already given up on the high-risk profession of Empress. She learned from Yang Yunuo that Chen Shengbei had put in a lot of effort to rescue her. Su Wan was moved and remembered his kindness. She decided to leave the palace in the future and live a good life with Chen Shengbei. Su Wan, who had already regarded Yang Yunuo as her best sister, told her her thoughts. Yang Yunuo was happy for Su Wan, but she also felt a little sad. In fact, in the past days, she and Chen Shengbei were already in love with each other, but when she thought of Su Wan's suffering and her engagement with Chen Shengbei, Yang Yunuo felt that she should fulfill their wishes. As a result, Yang Yunuo began to deliberately be indifferent and alienate Chen Shengbei. She did not even hesitate to ruin her image in front of him, making him feel that she was a selfish and vicious woman. Unfortunately, at this time, Chen Shengbei was already deeply in love with her. How could he be deceived by Yang Yunuo's clumsy acting skills? Chen Shengbei decided to find Su Wan and lay his cards on the table, but Yang Yunuo refused no matter what. While the two people were pulling and pulling, they saw that Su Wan had already appeared behind them with a cold expression. Su Wan, who felt that she was deceived by her most trusted sister and her lover, couldn't accept this blow for a while. She accidentally knocked over the oil lamp when she was lighting the lamps that night and almost caused a big fire. After making such a big mistake, Su Wan should have been taken to the worship room to be punished, but she was taken directly to Shoning Palace, where the noble imperial concubine Liang lived. Imperial concubine Liang entered the palace early and was of noble birth, but she had never been favored. Seeing that the newly entered palace's beautiful young mistress and those young and tender palace maids were all treated equally, imperial concubine Liang sighed in her heart that she had passed away. For the sake of her and her family's status, she began to look for outstanding candidates in the palace, wanting to train them into her own chess pieces and present them to His Majesty. And Su Wan was the person chosen by imperial concubine Liang. At this time, Su Wan had great hatred for Yang Yunuo, Chen Shengbei, and even Yang Yuqing. Her desire to turn over and retaliate was particularly strong, so under imperial concubine Liang's training, Su Wan successfully attracted the attention of His Majesty, Dongfang Yarou, and after being visited, she was granted the title of nobility as she wished. With imperial concubine Liang as her backing, Su Wan began to fight openly and covertly with Yang Yuqing. At the same time, she also constantly sent people to the Shangfu Bureau to find trouble with Yang Yunuo. Yang Yunuo was worthy of being the good holy mother of the great Shang dynasty. No matter what difficulties she encountered, she refused to bow her head. No matter what unfair treatment she encountered, she could clench her teeth and persevere, never resisting. Deep in the palace, another year passed in the blink of an eye. Both Su Wan and Yang Yuqing were pregnant. The flames of war between the two people escalated in order to have children. At this time, the two people who were fighting in full swing were harmed by another imperial concubine. The two people lost their children at the same time. Su Wan's health was extremely poor because she had a chronic illness in the Shinjaku. After an accident, she almost bled to death. Fortunately, the newly promoted imperial physician, Lu Mushuan, had superb medical skills and pulled her out of the line of life and death. At this time, Yang Yuqing still mistakenly thought that Su Wan was the mastermind behind the scenes. She began to collect evidence and complain in front of the emperor and the empress dowager. Because the evidence was conclusive, the crime of murdering the heir of the imperial family caused Su Wan to directly enter the cold palace. She was bedridden and had no one to rely on in the cold palace. At this time, Yang Yunuo appeared again and she also brought imperial physician Lu to help Su Wan see a doctor. This time, Su Wan, who didn't have long to live, truly saw through the illusions of riches and honor. She finally reconciled with Yang Yunuo on the hospital bed. Yang Yunuo versus Su Wan, the Holy Mother successfully subdued a vicious supporting female who abandoned darkness for light. Of course, this was only the first vicious supporting female that the Holy Mother saved on the road to the harem. After Su Wan was banished to the cold palace, the harem became the battlefield of Yang Yuqing and Zhenfei. It turned out that Liu Guiren once again entered the eyes of Dongfang Yarou because of the Song Huainan dream, and he was quickly upgraded to Zhenfei. At this time, Yang Yuqing also learned from the cold palace that Su Wan was really wronged. The mastermind behind the scenes who caused her to lose her child turned out to be the former Liu Guiren, the current Zhenfei. The two people could be said to be enemies, and when enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Zhenfei learned that Yang Yuqing and Yang Yunuo were biological sisters, so she found someone to set up a trap to frame Yang Yunuo. As a result, Yang Yuqing beat her at her own game and put on a show in front of the emperor. This allowed Yang Yuqing to smoothly gain the emperor's love and trust, but at the same time, it also let the emperor get to know Yang Yunuo. Yang Yunuo's kindness and sincerity made Dongfang Yarou, who grew up in the imperial city and was accustomed to deception, feel that it was very precious, so he transferred Yang Yunuo to his side to be the imperial attendant. Since Yang Yunuo's promotion, her status in the harem has risen, and she has also received infinite malice from various concubines. Fortunately, Yang Yunuo has always been in line with the principle of having a clear conscience, contentment, and doing good deeds without leaving a name. In danger again and again, she successfully averted danger and even saved 2 concubines who had fallen out of favor. At this time, Yang Yunuo was already a popular person around the emperor, and even Dongfang Yarrow had slowly fallen in love with this personal palace maid who accompanied him. Unfortunately, he knew a long time ago that Yang Yunuo liked Chen Shengbei. As an emperor, he didn't want his beloved woman to be trapped in the bloodless battlefield of the harem for a lifetime. Dongfang Yarrow had the intention to fulfill Yang Yunuo's wish, but who knew that at this time, Yang Yuqing, who had a deep sisterly relationship with Yang Yunuo on the surface, would suddenly make a move. In order not to let Yang Yunuo take the emperor away from her, Yang Yuqing arranged a scene to set up Yang Yunuo and Lu Mushuan. Lu Mushuan had long been in love with Yang Yunuo. The two often met in the inner palace, but they had always been close friends. After being framed by Yang Yuqing, the two people were given a powerful aphrodisiac and locked in an empty palace. In order to protect the innocence of his beloved, Lu Mushuan did not hesitate to harm himself. In the end, although the two people were found in time by the emperor, Lu Mushuan was unconscious because of excessive blood loss, and Yang Yunuo, who was also affected by the aphrodisiac, was immediately carried by Dongfang Yarrow to the imperial hospital for treatment. Afterwards, Dongfang Yarrow immediately sent someone to investigate the matter thoroughly. Yang Yuqing saw that her affairs had been exposed, and she couldn't help but run to Yang Yunuo's sickbed and plead bitterly. Yang Yunuo, who had always been kind-hearted, naturally believed Yang Yuqing's words. She pleaded for her sister in front of the emperor with her sick body, and Yang Yuqing was exempted from punishment. After this incident, although Yang Yuqing was not banished to the cold palace, she was demoted from Duan Fei to Duan Pin, and since then, she has completely lost Dongfang Yarrow's favor. Yang Yuqing, who had been a concubine's daughter since childhood and had never been willing to bow her head to her fate, still refused to admit defeat at this time. Without the emperor's favor, she unexpectedly gained the favor of Rui Wang Dongfang Li. Dongfang Li was the son of the former emperor's imperial brother and the cousin of the current emperor. He seemed to be a playboy, but in fact, he was extremely ambitious. Dongfang Li, who wanted to seize the throne, took advantage of Yang Yuqing's disfavor to get close to her. He used feelings as bait to slowly conquer Yang Yuqing's heart. After she was dead set on him, he began to instruct Yang Yuqing to tamper with the emperor's food and drink. At this time, because Yang Yuqing was not favored, there were naturally no informants around her, which became the best opportunity for her to make a move. Within a few days, Dongfang Yarrow was poisoned into a coma and all the evidence pointed to Yang Yunuo as the murderer who poisoned the emperor. Yang Yunuo, who was framed and imprisoned, was waiting to be beheaded in prison. At this time, Yang Yuqing finally couldn't help going to the prison to show off her strength. At the same time, Dongfang Li took advantage of Dongfang Yarrow's poisoning to premeditate a coup d'état. At the critical moment, Lu Mushuan tested the poison with his own body and successfully rescued Dongfang Yarrow. At this time, Chen Shengbei also brought the elite guards to the rescue. Dongfang Li's palace coup d'état failed and was sent to prison. Yang Yunuo's grievances were cleared and she was released from prison. After she was released from prison, Dongfang Yarrow rewarded her according to her merits and personally betrothed Chen Shengbei and Yang Yunuo in marriage. At this time, because she heard Yang Yuqing's repentance in prison and saw her extremely embarrassed situation, Yang Yunuo, who was once again moved with compassion, once again pleaded for Yang Yuqing in front of Dongfang Yarrow, "Holy Mother, you are really enough." For the sake of Yang Yunuo's face, Dongfang Yarrow once again pardoned Yang Yuqing's death sentence, but changed her to a temple for a lifetime of cultivation. On the day that Yang Yuqing was released from prison and left the capital, Yang Yunuo personally saw her off outside the capital. It was thought that the two sisters were reluctant to part, but who knew that Yang Yuqing, who had already lost her mind and fell into madness, suddenly pulled out a dagger from her cuff and stabbed it at Yang Yunuo's chest. At the critical moment, Chen Shengbei turned around and held Yang Yunuo in his arms, blocking a fatal knife for her. Afterwards, Yang Yuqing committed suicide, and although the seriously injured Chen Shengbei was rescued by Lu Mushuan, he could no longer practice martial arts and lead troops in this life. The plot ended here. Chen Shengbei resigned and returned to her hometown of Jinju with Yang Yunuo. The two lived a happy life where the man farmed and the woman weaved. Is this the so-called happy ending? Happy ending. Your sister's husband. Let's not talk about how many innocent palace maids and eunuchs were cannon fodder in Holy Mother Yang's harem promotion record. Let's talk about the two men, Chen Shengbei and Lu Mushuan. One mutilated himself and tested poison for her. A young and promising great imperial doctor eventually became a sickly person who couldn't stop taking medicine, and the other was a great general who should have commanded thousands of troops to serve the country, but in the end, because of her, he became a third-class disability who couldn't lift his hand. Female lead, you have the world in your heart, you have a compassionate heart, you save all living beings, you don't cheat others, you only cheat your own man. After Su Wn lit a candle for the male lead and supporting male in her heart, she couldn't help but mutter in her heart. In this world, when it comes to affectionate supporting males, it would be Lu Mushuan and Dongfang Yao. If Su Rui enters this mission world, what will his identity be? If it's Lu Mushuan, it's fine, but if it's Dongfang Yao who has 3,000 beauties, mph. Chapter 160. In the late autumn morning, the sky was grey and a thin layer of white frost had condensed on the red brick Imperial Road. Sister, wake up. Her stiff body was pushed a few times and Su Wan's consciousness gradually became sober. She slowly opened her eyes and saw a young palace maid wearing a cyan palace dress. This was the little palace maid who got up early in the morning to clean the Imperial Road. Such a palace maid had no rank, and her status was only higher than the slave palace maids of the Laundry Bureau and Shinjaku. When the little palace maid saw Su Wn wake up, she immediately lowered her head and became docile. Sister, it's dawn. Are you people from the 6th Bureau? The sister next to me seems to have a fever. I called her for a long time, but she didn't respond. Su Wn had just moved her stiff limbs at this time. When she heard the words of the little palace maid, she remembered Yang Yunuo next to her. Yang Yunuo's robe was still on her body. Now she was only wearing a thin inner garment. Her whole body was frozen and her face showed a strange red color. Oh no! Su Wan immediately struggled to stand up. At this moment, she remembered the plot she was experiencing now. It was in the original plot when she and Yang Yunuo were framed by those old palace maids in the Shangfu Bureau. The two of them sent flower patterns to Empress Shu to choose from yesterday. As a result, those flower patterns were secretly cut. Empress Shu was angry and punished the two of them to kneel outside her Jingyun palace for a night. Because she knelt all night, Su Wn couldn't exert any strength after standing up, and her hands and feet were stiff. She tried to support Yang Yunuo and failed several times. In desperation, Su Wn had to look up at the little palace maid beside her. What is your name? Replying to sister, this servant's name is Bingyu. Bingyu also looked to be 13 or 14 years old. The little girl looked quite clever. Su Wan's eyes flashed. Bingyu, do you know Imperial Physician Lu in the Imperial Hospital? Imperial Physician Lu? Bingyue's eyes turned. Is sister talking about Imperial Physician Lu Mushuan? Lu Mushuan was young, handsome, and had superb medical skills. Because he often went in and out of the harem to treat the Empress Dowager and various concubines, most of the palace maids in the harem recognized him. It is Imperial Physician Lu Mushuan. I don't have any strength now. Bingyu, help me carry her to Imperial Physician Lu. We are very familiar with Imperial Physician Lu. Su Wan also didn't know if Su Rui had already entered the mission at this time, and was his identity Lu Mushuan or Dongfang Yao? Now that Yang Yunuo had a fever like this, Su Wan had no time to think about it. She could only find someone to treat her as soon as possible. If the female lead Daren's brain was burned, then what kind of mission would she be able to do? Bingyu hesitated. As the lowest-ranked palace maid, she was naturally willing to be on good terms with the high-ranked palace maids. But the Imperial Hospital wasn't a place anyone could enter. What if, Bingyu, don't tell me you want to keep cleaning the Imperial Road. Seeing Bingyu's hesitation, Su Wn couldn't help but whisper, "As long as you help me, I won't treat you unfairly." Hearing Su Wan's promise, Bingyu bit her lips and hesitated. In the end, she looked up at Su Wan's face and said, "Okay, sister, let me help you." As she spoke, she quickly stepped forward and supported Yang Yunuo, who was already somewhat unconscious, from the other side. The two people walked all the way in the direction of the Imperial Hospital. At this time, the sky was not yet bright. In the entire palace, except for the people who were cleaning the Imperial Road early in the morning, there were almost no other figures. In fact, Lu Mushuan was not always in the Imperial Hospital. Sometimes he would stay directly in the Imperial Hospital if he had to see patients overnight, and sometimes if there was nothing going on in the harem, he would leave the palace and go back to his own house. Su Wan was thinking about the possibility of Su Rui being Lu Mushuan along the way. Until she and Bingyu arrived outside the Imperial Hospital, the two people were directly stopped by the servant at the entrance of the hospital. The Imperial Hospital is an important place. No one is allowed to enter without permission. "Two sisters, do you have the jade card to enter and exit the palace?" The manservant at the door stopped the two of them and asked respectfully. He had been guarding the Imperial Hospital for a few months. He knew almost all the first-class palace maids and female officials who served the concubines. Now that he saw the person in front of him was rather unfamiliar, he naturally had to ask about it according to the rules. "We are looking for Imperial Physician Lu. Is Imperial Physician Lu here?" Su Wan glanced at the servant at the door and asked faintly. "Imperial Physician Lu hasn't gotten up yet." As the servant spoke, he looked at Su Wan and then looked at Yang Yunuo, who was being supported by Su Wan and Bingyu. "This sister seems to have a high fever. If you don't have the Master's Jade card, you can go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs." The Ministry of Internal Affairs in the Imperial City was in charge of the food and drink of all the servants in the palace, as well as their monthly salaries and daily necessities. If the palace maids and servants were sick or injured, they could also go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs to spend money to see a doctor. "This little brother, we are Imperial Physician Lu's fellow countrymen." When Su Wan heard the servant's words, she immediately raised her wrist, took out her purse from her sleeve and handed it over with a smile. "Please go in and inform Imperial Physician Lu, sorry for troubling you." "This." The servant looked at the purse handed over by Su Wan and hesitated for a moment. When he thought that Imperial Physician Lu was famous for his good temper, his eyes narrowed and he quickly took Su Wan's purse. "It turns out that elder sister is Imperial Physician Lu's fellow countryman. You should have said so earlier. This little one will go in and inform." As he spoke, the servant quickly turned around and entered the door of the Imperial Hospital. Not long after, he hurriedly rushed out again. "Elder sisters, Imperial Physician Lu has just woken up, please come in." Su Wan and Bingyu looked at each other and the two immediately helped Yang Yunuo into the Imperial Hospital. The entire courtyard was still filled with the faint fragrance of herbs. At this time, Yang Yunuo also regained some consciousness. She murmured and slowly opened her eyes. Seeing the unfamiliar scenery in front of her, Yang Yunuo frowned and her eyes were in a trance. It wasn't until she caught a glimpse of Su Wan's face that her eyes lit up. "Xiao Wan, this is... Where are we going?" "Sister Yunuo, you have a fever. I brought you to see Imperial Physician Lu." Su Wan saw that Yang Yunuo had woken up and couldn't help but whisper in her ear. "Imperial Physician Lu? Isn't he the most famous one in the harem?" "No, no need, I'm fine. It just so happens that I'm off today. I'll go back and sleep." Xiao Wan. To see the Imperial Physician, it costs a lot of money. Yang Yunuo had never been to the Imperial Hospital in the year she entered the palace, but she had heard a lot about the Imperial Hospital. This place was a place for the masters to see a doctor. She was just a palace maid, how could she afford it? Just as Yang Yunuo was struggling to turn around, Su Wan and Bingyu had already entered the door, and a clear and melodious male voice was heard in the room. "You are my fellow countrymen?" The man's tone rose, but his tone was very gentle and did not seem particularly cold. Hearing that voice, Su Wan abruptly raised her head. In the end, she saw a handsome young face. "It's not Su Rui." Su Wan's face immediately sank. "So, Su Rui's identity in this world is the current emperor, Dongfang Yarou. Zhonggong, Chenkuan Palace. Su Rui opened his eyes and the first thing he saw was the golden Nanmu bedpost carved with dragons and phoenixes. The luxurious and spacious palace was filled with the familiar smell of ambergris, and a soft, boneless body was wrapped around him like a snake. Feeling that there was another person on the bed, and it was a woman wearing nothing, Su Rui's face suddenly changed. Almost at the moment when his consciousness returned, he suddenly kicked the woman beside him off the bed. The still sleepy imperial concubine was kicked to the ground and she instantly woke up. Hearing the sound in the inner room, the chamberlain who had been guarding outside immediately rushed over. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" The long hair of the woman on the ground was disheveled, her seductive eyes looking at the beautiful and handsome face on the dragon bed, while the chamberlain on the side bent over, slightly raised his eyelids, and hesitantly looked at the man on the dragon bed. "Get out!" Su Rui's eyes were cold as he roared. The woman on the ground turned pale and looked at him with lustrous eyes. "Your Majesty, this concubine. This concubine didn't wear anything." Hearing the woman's voice, Su Rui's eyes darkened again. "You don't want to get out? Then stay." "Your Majesty." Hearing Su Rui's words, the imperial concubine's beautiful eyes flashed and she was about to smile charmingly at His Majesty. As a result, she saw the man on the dragon bed raise his hand and pull out the emperor's sword that had been hanging on the left side of the dragon bed. The pitilessly sharp sword drew a cold light in the air and instantly penetrated her youthful and seductive body. An arrow pierced through the heart, without a drop of extra blood spilling out. It is said that accompanying the emperor is like accompanying a tiger. The chamberlain on the side was indeed a senior talent who could move unhindered in the harem. Not only was he indifferent to the murder happening around him, but he also calmly bent over and slowly walked to the imperial concubine. He raised his hand to check her breath, reporting to Your Majesty, Yu Gui Ren offended the emperor's face and has been executed. What's the use of one dead? General Su felt very sad. He swore to God that he didn't touch that woman at all. Even if they slept on the same bed, it was the original owner Dongfang Yarou who had sex with her last night. His body and heart were innocent. Chapter 161. Seeing his master sitting on the dragon bed in a daze, the head chamberlain Wang Yi immediately directed the little eunuch behind him to carry Yu Guiren's body away, and then turned his head to instruct the palace maids on the side to clean up the ground. After silently finishing all this, Wang Yi bent over and moved to the dragon bed, picked up the bright yellow inner garment on the side and draped it over Su Rui's body. He pinched his throat and asked in a low voice, "Your Majesty, do you want to take a bath and change clothes? It's almost time to go to the imperial court." "Go to your sister's imperial court." Su Rui looked up at Wang Yi, and just one look made Wang Yi break out in a cold sweat. His ice-cold, deep, and gloomy eyes were like a cold lake, causing people to shrink back. Wang Yi trembled and took a few steps back, his body involuntarily bowing lower. "Take a bath." After a long silence, Su Rui finally spoke in a low voice. When Wang Yi heard his master's voice, he immediately turned around and greeted the palace maids in the Chenkuan Palace with the things that had been prepared a long time ago. Su Rui on the dragon bed looked at the clothes belonging to Dongfang Yarou and couldn't help but frown. When he raised his eyes again, a group of beautiful palace maids was already in front of him. "Everyone retreat." General Su was angry again. Isn't this forcing people to make mistakes? Seeing the emperor's anger, the palace maids on the side immediately trembled and all knelt down and retreated. On the side, Wang Yi's face, which had been pretending to be calm, finally showed a trace of panic. What's wrong with His Majesty today? How did that Yu Gui Ren provoke His Majesty? You see, His Majesty is so angry that everyone is not pleasing to the eye now. Wang Yi. Just as Wang Yi was secretly cursing, Su Rui had already sat up from the dragon bed. He pulled the inner garment draped over his shoulder and threw it to the ground in disgust. "Everything, including this dragon bed, destroy it all for Zhen. Also, immediately call the chamberlain to come in and help Zhen bathe and change clothes. In the future, there will be no more palace maids in the Chenkuan Palace." Wang Yi. Terrible, terrible. Could it be that His Majesty had been provoked by Yu Gui Ren to hate women? Hearing Su Rui's instructions, Wang Yi immediately turned around to execute, but his heart was already full of tears. In the Imperial Hospital. In the clean and tidy room, Yang Yunuo leaned weakly on the bed, while Lu Mushuan sat on the yellow pear-wood chair beside the bed, holding a silver needle in his hand, leaving needle holes on her white wrist. Yang Yunuo, who was not yet 15 years old, was sitting so close to a man for the first time in her life. Moreover, she had to roll up her sleeves in front of him and expose her white wrists. Such intimate contact made Yang Yunuo feel like her heart was pounding and her face was burning. Aya, Sister Yunuo's face seems to be even redder. Bingyu, who had been standing on the side, couldn't help but exclaim when she saw Yang Yunuo's red cheeks. Su Wan. Sister Frozen Moon, I know that you're actually trying to be familiar with us, but did you really not mean to yell like this? Hearing Bingyue's blabbermouth, Yang Yunuo immediately felt ashamed and subconsciously moved her arm. Don't move. A glimmer of light flashed in Lu Mushuan's eyes. His slender and clean fingers gently pressed on Yang Yunuo's arm. A slightly hot electric current came from his fingertips, making Yang Yunuo's whole body stiffen, not daring to move. Catching a glimpse of the smile that flashed across Lu Mushuan's lips, Su Wan, who was not far away, also slightly raised the corner of her lips. She seemed to have accidentally paired Imperial Physician Lu and the female lead Daran together. Speaking of which, first come, first served is really a lot of knowledge. In the original plot, Imperial Physician Lu lost because he appeared too late. After a while, it's done. Lu Mushuan put away the silver needles and gently and carefully helped Yang Yunuo smooth her sleeves. I will prescribe you medicine again. You have to take it on time after you go back so that the cold energy in your body will be completely removed. Seeing Lu Mushuan turn to write a prescription on the wooden table on the side, Yang Yunuo bit her lip and looked at Lu Mushuan's thin back for the first time. She weakly opened her mouth and said, Imperial Physician Lu, the consultation fee. How much is the consultation fee? Asking about the consultation fee, Yang Yunuo was obviously not confident. She subconsciously touched the purse around her waist, which contained the monthly payment she had just received this month. Consultation fee? After writing the last word of the prescription, Lu Mushuan turned to look at Su Wan, who had been standing silently not far away. Your little sister has already paid the consultation fee for you. Xiao Wan? Yang Yunuo's eyes immediately fell on Su Wan. She knew the situation of Su Wan's family. Now Father Su still owed a lot of money, but she was even poorer than herself. It's okay, Sister Yunuo. Imperial Physician Lu is a famous philanthropist. He treats people very cheaply. I still have money left over from the money I gave him. Seeing Yang Yunuo looking at her, Su Wan immediately whispered with a smile on her face. She couldn't help but take a step forward, raised her little hand and waved in front of Lu Mushuan. Imperial Physician Lu, chain. Lu Mushuan smiled gently and turned his eyes to the door. Fu Lu, change for the patient. When the servant named Fu Lu heard Lu Mushuan's call, he immediately lowered his head and walked to Su Wan with a red face. Sister, your change. As he spoke, he reluctantly stuffed all the silver that Su Wan had given him not long ago back into Su Wan's palm. It's too much. Su Wan bent her eyes and stuffed half of the broken silver back into Fu Lu's hand. Your name is Fu Lu? In the future, pay more attention to Imperial Physician Lu. Do good deeds and you will be rewarded. Be a good person, do good deeds, and you will be rewarded. Hearing Su Wan's words, Fu Lu immediately looked at her with sparkling eyes and a face full of excitement. Su Wan. Don't thank elder sister, please call elder sister Holy Mother Su. That's right, after Su Wan entered the mission, she had already thought of a super good idea that completely beat Holy Mother Yang. When you meet a pear blossom in the rain, please don't be careless and be more pitiful than her. When you meet a good Holy Mother who returns evil with good, then please be bold and rest assured to help her. Let her feel that your whole body is full of positive energy. Su Wan has always believed that negative is positive. When two Holy Mothers walk together, it's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. In short, for this mission, Su Wan decided to fight. Aya, I'll go. Just as Su Wan was about to help Yang Yunuo leave, a panting figure yelled and rushed into Lu Mushuan's room. After entering the room, The person quickly patted his small chest, raised his phoenix eyes, and quickly swept his gaze across the room. Yang Yunyor, Su Wn. You too, really, really tired Zijia to death. Chen Gonggong. This person was none other than the steward of the Shangfu Bureau, Chen Ji. At this time, Chen Ji saw that Yang Yunyor and Su Wn still wanted to salute him. He immediately waved his small hand and stepped forward to grab both of their hands. You two. Come back to the Shangfu Bureau with me. You guys are in trouble this time. In big trouble. What big trouble? Hearing Chen Ji's words, Yang Yunyor's face changed, and Bingyu, who was originally following behind the two people, took 2 steps back without a trace, keeping a certain distance from the two people. The atmosphere in the room was a little tense and depressing for a while. Lu Mushuan kept his eyes down, seemingly indifferent, but in fact, he had been waiting for Chen Ji to continue. It's His Majesty, he. As soon as Chen Ji mentioned His Majesty, his androgynous little face immediately turned pale. His Majesty is in the Shangfu Bureau, killed a lot of people. At the thought of the scene of blood flowing like a river, Chen Ji felt his stomach tremble. On the way here, he also saw corpses rolled up with mats coming in and out of the Jingyun Palace's palace gate. That blood, dark red, that horrifying ah. In short, early this morning, His Majesty was furious for some reason. First, he stabbed Yu Guiren to death with a sword, then he ordered Xu Fei's death and massacred the Jingyun Palace. Now, isn't it the Shangfu Bureau's turn now? Coincidentally, most of the people in the Shangfu Bureau were here today, but Su Wan and Yang Yunyor were missing. Chen Ji simply didn't dare to think about it anymore. These 2 little girls were probably doomed today and it would be hard for them to escape death. His Majesty killed people in the Shangfu Bureau? Hearing Chen Ji's words, Yang Yunyor's legs softened. What about Liao Xi? Is Liao Xi okay? The Holy Mother really put others before herself, making Su Wan unable to catch up to her. It seems that this fake Holy Mother still needs to continue to work hard. But His Majesty, isn't it General Su? Chapter 162. Su Wan and Yang Yunyor followed behind Chen Ji and almost ran straight from the Imperial Hospital to the Shangfu Bureau. Before they reached the door, they saw a group of servants carrying a blood-dripping mat coming out of the palace gate of the Shangfu Bureau. Yang Yunyor tightly covered her mouth and turned her face in horror. Her whole body leaned in front of Su Wan, and her other hand did not forget to cover Su Wan's eyes with a trembling hand. She had been in the palace for more than a year. Although she had long heard that people's lives were like grass in the depths of the palace, it was really the first time that Yang Yunyor had seen such a scene. At this time, the servant carrying the blood-stained mat just walked to the side of the 3 people. The blood-stained mat suddenly scattered for some reason, and a bloody arm suddenly drooped down weakly. Yang Yunyor screamed again, and her originally pale little face was now bloodless. Who is making noise here? At this time, Wang Yi, who was wearing the chief eunuch uniform, walked out of the palace gate with a cold face and a horsetail whisk in his hand. That pair of indifferent eyes directly fell on Su Wan and Yang Yunyor. This slave deserves to die. This slave deserves to die. Yang Yunyor panicked and immediately pulled Su Wan to kneel on the ground, her teeth chattering. Steward Wang. At this time, Chen Ji staggered to the front of Wang Yi and said in a low voice while saluting, Steward Wang, the 2 of them are Yang Yunyor and Su Wan of the Shangfu Bureau. This little girl is timid. Don't be angry. When Wang Yi heard Chen Ji's report, his eyes flickered slightly as he looked at the 2 women. These 2 little palace maids looked like they had just entered the palace not long ago. They looked to be 14 or 15 years old, and they both looked upright and delicate, but since the people have been found, hurry up and report to His Majesty. Don't just stand there and kneel, hurry up and catch up with Chen Ji. After saying that, Wang Yi couldn't help but use his horsetail whisk to fiercely hit Chen Ji. As a chamberlain, he must learn to figure out the emperor's intentions. Although His Majesty did not say much in the Shangfu Bureau, Wang Yi had long seen that His Majesty seemed to be specifically looking for these 2 little palace maids. Seeing that Chen Ji had not returned for a long time, His Majesty had become more and more irritable. Seeing this scene, Wang Yi took the initiative to volunteer to look for them. He did not expect that he would meet the main character as soon as he arrived at the palace gate. Chen Ji's expression changed when he was struck by Wang Yi's horsetail whisk, and he couldn't help but speed up his footsteps. He knew that Manager Wang was reminding him that His Majesty had been waiting impatiently since a long time ago, and if he was a few steps slower, he might lose his head. Fuck, for the sake of the head on my neck, I have to run as fast as I can. You too, hurry up if you don't want to die. As Chen Ji ran, he did not forget to look back at Su Wen and Yang Yunuo and shouted a few words in a low voice. Encountering such a big thing, his legs were already weak. How could he run? Yang Yunuo tightly held Su Wan's small hand beside her, her lips trembling slightly. Xiao Wen, don't be afraid, it's okay. His Majesty is wise, he won't kill the innocent. She was so scared that she couldn't walk, but Yang Yunuo did not forget to comfort Su Wen beside her. Although Su Wan's face was also pale, there was no trace of fear in her eyes. Instead, a trace of profound craftiness flashed across her eyes. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Chen Ji hadn't even entered the door when he bent over and shouted while sprinting. He prostrated himself on the ground and slid to the center of the main hall. This job, this proficiency, this posture, this perfection, really worthy of being the successor carefully cultivated by Wang Yi Your Majesty, this slave has found the person. Chen Ji had been bending over and lowering his head since he entered the door. At this time, as he spoke, he secretly gestured to Su Wen and Yang Yunuo with his left hand behind him. You two still haven't come in to greet His Majesty. This slave greets His Majesty, long live His Majesty. Su Wen and Yang Yunuo knelt on the ground and bowed their heads to greet His Majesty. At this time, on the embroidered couch in the center of the palace, Su Rui was wearing a black dragon robe embroidered with gold. His heavy gaze instinctively fell on Su Wen, your mother. General Su wanted to cry but had no tears. In the previous world, his wife was at least a 17-year-old female high school student. What was she trying to do by turning into a 14-year-old little loli this time? Well, although General Su's previous world was also full of early marriages and early childbearing, after all, he had been to so many worlds and his thinking had changed a lot. I am now a law-abiding youth who loves small animals and looks at the traffic lights when crossing the road, okay? What lolican, in fact, Su Wan's current appearance is also quite cute. Su Rui kept staring at Su Wen in a daze. As a result, the air in the entire hall froze. No one dared to take a deep breath. Everyone lowered their heads and dared not make any movements, for fear of disturbing His Majesty and dying without an intact corpse. In short, His Majesty was too terrifying today. It was better for everyone to pretend to be dead. Time passed minute by minute. When Su Wan's legs were numb from kneeling, Su Rui, who was on the brocade couch, finally reacted. With a handsome face, he looked at Su Wen and Yang Yunuo in the main hall. As palace servants of the Shangfu Bureau, you actually left your post without permission. Do you two know your crime? Although his voice was still so cold, Su Rui's tone was obviously much gentler. Your Majesty. Seeing that the Emperor was going to punish them, Yang Yunuo immediately raised her head nervously. She couldn't let Su Wen be punished with her. After all, Su Wen left her post without permission to treat her. Even if she was going to be beheaded, Yang Yunuo didn't want to implicate other innocent people. Thinking of this, her gaze gradually became firm and her heart didn't seem to be so afraid. Your Majesty, everything is, it's this slave's fault. Su Wen suddenly spoke before Yang Yunuo. Your Majesty, everything is this slave's idea. Please punish me, Your Majesty. It's you. Su Rui's eyes flashed and he looked at Su Wen with a slightly profound look. No, it's not. Your Majesty is actually. Shut up. Seeing that Yang Yunuo was going to take over him again, Su Rui couldn't bear it and interrupted her. Didn't he go through so much trouble just to find an opportunity to be alone with his wife for a while? Female lead. What are you doing? Can you still make people fall in love happily? Feeling Su Rui's anger, everyone in the room knelt on the ground in fear. Your Majesty, please calm down. When the Emperor is angry, millions of corpses will be laid. This is definitely not a joke. Everyone retreat. Su Wen, you stay. Su Rui, who was on the couch, took the opportunity to wave his sleeves. Hearing His Majesty speak, the rest of the people in the Shangfu Bureau breathed a sigh of relief in their hearts. Everyone wished they could grow 2 more legs so that they could run out immediately. Everyone else quickly retreated, only Yang Yunuo was still kneeling in the same place. Her face was unafraid of death. It was as if she wanted to die together with Su Xiaowan. No, it was the rhythm of living and dying together. Seeing that the female lead was so sentimental and righteous, General Su's face became even more gloomy. Get out. The word go hadn't fallen yet when Yang Yunuo felt a gust of wind rushing towards her chest. Then her thin and weak body immediately flew out of the hall like a kite with a broken string, and the palace gate also closed without any wind at this time. Hello, Holy Mother Yang. Goodbye, Holy Mother Yang. The whole world was finally quiet. Su Rui smiled with satisfaction, but the smile on his face froze on his lips in the next second. Su Wan, who was originally kneeling on the ground, stood up at this time. Rubbing her numb knees, Su Wan walked step by step to the brocade couch with a smile. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. You are really awe-inspiring, Su Rui. Your Majesty's dragon robe is also very beautiful. Seeing that Su Rui didn't speak, Su Wan continued to smile. Her slender, white, and tender little fingers gently swept over Su Rui's dragon robe, and then her eyes fell on Su Rui's 9 dragons jade belt. The sewing of this belt is also first class. Aya, I heard that it was personally embroidered with gold thread by Yunfei Nyang, who is the best at needlework. What the hell is Yunfei? Su Rui's face stiffened. His slender and powerful arm pulled hard and pulled the thin and petite Su Xiaowan into his arms. Wife, don't laugh. I'm panicking just looking at you. Listen to my explanation. Su Wan, who was sitting in Su Rui's arms, suddenly wrinkled her nose and sniffed him hard. So fragrant, this fragrance seems to be. Wife, I was wrong. General Su wanted to cry. Before the court session, His Majesty the Emperor had already taken several baths, okay? And after the court session, His Majesty the Emperor, who loves his wife as much as his life, first killed his way to Jingyun Palace, and then killed his way to the Shangfu Bureau, killing all the people who caused his wife to suffer. Where is the fragrance coming from now? It's clearly the smell of blood. Hearing Su Rui take the initiative to admit his mistake, Su Wan's drooping eyes flashed with a smile, but the expression on her face was still like a smile yet not a smile. Your Majesty, you hold life and death in your hands. You can turn your hand and call the clouds and cover your hand and call the rain. How could you be wrong? Su Rui. Just when Su Rui was full of powerlessness and felt that he wouldn't be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River this time, Su Wan, who was in his arms, suddenly turned around, a pair of arms wrapped around Su Rui's body, and her pink and sparkling lips smacked on his lips. Happiness came too suddenly. When Su Rui reacted, Su Wan, who was in his arms, was already trembling with laughter. Okay, you played with me. His Majesty the Emperor, who was slow on the uptake, finally put down the boulder in his heart. His handsome face also had a bit of a relaxed smile. Wife, you're not angry? You really scared me to death. That's why it's said that henpecked and henpecked are a group of very simple creatures. You think you've smoothly passed. Chapter 163. The door of the Shangfu Bureau's main hall had been closed, and no one knew what happened inside. Ever since Yang Yunuo was swept out of the main hall by Su Rui's internal energy, she was in a state of stupefaction. At this time, her heart was full of concern for Su Wan's safety. After entering the palace for more than a year, Yang Yunuo had long been accustomed to being bullied, and she was also used to subconsciously protecting Yang Yuqing when she encountered anything. In Yang Yunuo's heart, Yang Yuqing was originally her master, and now she was her younger sister. It was a matter of course for her to protect her and even suffer for her. Since Yang Yunuo entered the Shangfu Bureau and separated from Yang Yuqing, she met Su Wan again. From the beginning of their acquaintance, Su Wan had been helping her, and the two had been supporting each other. Yang Yunuo was a few months older than Su Wan. She felt that she should treat Yang Yuqing the same way she treated Yang Yuqing, protecting Su Wan and everything about her, but today. Yunuo. Liao Xi, dressed in a brocade dress, stood behind Yang Yunuo at some point. Seeing her worried look, Liao Ci couldn't help but pat her on the shoulder. Yunuo, don't worry, Su Wan should be fine. As she spoke, Liao Ci's eyes couldn't help but look at the closed palace door. She clearly remembered that when His Majesty first arrived at the Shangfu Bureau, he killed several people without saying a word. Now, there was no sound in the palace, and His Majesty did not call anyone in, so at least, Su Wan was still alive. After an unknown amount of time, just after everyone else in the Shangfu Bureau was busy, Yang Yunuo was still waiting anxiously in the palace garden. At this time, a low and indifferent male voice finally came from the main hall. Wang Yi. Wang Yi, who had been conscientiously guarding the entrance of the main hall, heard the emperor's call and immediately pushed open the door and walked in quickly. As Wang Yi's figure disappeared, Yang Yunuo in the palace garden looked at the closed door again, and her heart was even more worried. Your Majesty. At this time, Wang Yi had walked quickly to the center of the main hall, bowing and waiting for his master's instructions. Wang Yi, palace maid Su Wan has violated the rules of the palace and will be banished to Shinjuku to work for a month from now on. You will handle this matter personally. Wang Yi, who had his head lowered, quickly heard Su Rui's instructions. He immediately nodded and subconsciously searched for the little palace maid's figure in the corner of his eyes. No? Wang Yi froze. He remembered that the little palace maid called Su Wan was kneeling in that position before he left. How did she disappear? Steward Wang, are you looking for this servant? A crisp female voice suddenly sounded in front of Wang Yi. He subconsciously raised his head and was immediately stunned on the spot. His mouth was slightly open, and he couldn't close it at all. On the embroidered couch in front of him, the emperor reclined with a satisfied expression. The young palace maid was like a cat, comfortably nestled in the emperor's arms. At this moment, she was lazily raising her clear eyes and looking at Wang Yi with a smile. Steward Wang, I must have raised my head the wrong way. Wang Yi was shocked and immediately lowered his head quickly. Seeing that Wang Yi had the awareness he should have so quickly, Su Rui also smiled with satisfaction. Wang Yi, I trust you the most. I will leave this matter to you. Go do it immediately. As he spoke, Su Rui couldn't help but look down at Su Wan in his arms with a face full of reluctance. Seeing Su Rui open his mouth to say something, Su Wan raised her finger and gently rubbed it on his lips. Then she turned over and sat next to Su Rui. She leaned against his ear with a mysterious face and whispered, Your Majesty, I will wait for you in the Shinjuku tonight. Hearing Su Wan's words, His Majesty the Emperor's face was slightly happy. It was still his wife who knew his intentions. General Su, are you sure? Su Wan, hehe. Steward Wang, let's go. At this time, Su Wan had already gotten down from the embroidered couch and walked to Wang Yi. Miss Su, please. Wang Yi lowered his tone and spoke to Su Wan in a very respectful tone. At this time, if he still didn't understand what His Majesty came to the Shangfu Bureau for in the morning, then he really had lived these 30 years in vain. Steward Wang is too polite. This servant is now a sinner, how can I dare to walk in front of you? Su Wan heard Wang Yi's words, but she smiled slightly and raised her hand to make a gesture at Wang Yi. Steward Wang, please go first. Oh. When Wang Yi heard Su Wan's words, his eyes turned and he immediately turned to walk in front, while Su Wan lowered her head and followed behind him. When she was about to go out, she felt the familiar and gentle gaze that had been watching her from behind. Su Wan couldn't help but turn her head and smile at Su Rui. The palace door opened again. Seeing the figure of Wang Yi and Su Wan, Yang Yunuo, who had been waiting anxiously, immediately rushed over. Xiao Wan, are you okay? Impudent. Seeing Yang Yunuo rushing up to grab Su Wan's hand, Wang Yi's face immediately turned cold. He swept his horsetail whisk and swept Yang Yunuo aside. Is Miss Su's hand something you can touch? That belongs to His Majesty Steward Wang. Chen Ji, who had been waiting in the courtyard, immediately trotted up at this time. He first rolled his eyes at Yang Yunuo, then Chen Ji smiled at Wang Yi and lowered his body. Steward Wang, this little girl is scared silly. Don't lower yourself to her level. This Su Wan, she. His Majesty means. Banish Shinjaku for a month. Hearing Chen Ji's words, Wang Yi whispered coldly. Shinjaku. Chen Ji's face changed slightly, and Yang Yunyor's face had long turned ashen. What kind of place was Shinjaku? That was a place in the harem that was even lower than the cold palace. It was not a place for people to stay at all. Steward Wang. Yang Yunyor suddenly knelt on the ground and grabbed Wang Yi's boots with both hands. Steward Wang, this servant wants to see His Majesty. This servant is willing to take Su Wan's place to be punished. 1 month, no, 2 months is fine. I beg Steward Wang to fulfill my wish. Wang Yi. Do you think Miss Su went there to be punished? She went there to be a great aunt, okay? Steward Wang. Chen Ji on the side also couldn't bear it at this time. This Su Wan, she is also conscientious in the Shangfu Bureau. Steward Wang, do you think you can beg His Majesty? You don't have to plead for her anymore, otherwise, be careful that you won't be able to keep your head. Wang Yi was also at his wit's end. He immediately glared at them with a fierce look on his face. Someone, pull this little palace maid away for me. As he spoke, 2 inner servants quickly stepped forward and pulled Yang Yunyor, who had been pulling Wang Yi's boots, to the side. Let's go. Wang Yi straightened his body and strode forward. Su Wan followed behind him and looked at Yang Yunyor, who was pulled to the side. She couldn't help but smile comfortingly at her with a pale face. Sister Yunyor, don't worry, I can stand it. As she spoke, she quickly turned her head and quickly followed behind Wang Yi. After several people walked away, Yang Yunyor was slowly released. Xiao Wan, Xiao Wan. Yang Yunyor's face was already full of tears. Seeing Chen Ji still in the courtyard, Yang Yunyor immediately grabbed Chen Ji's sleeves as if she had found a life-saving straw. Chen Gonggong, save me, save me. Seeing that Yang Yunyor was crying pitifully, Chen Ji rolled his eyes. Okay, Zijia's clothes are going to be dirted by you. Poor Chen Xiaoji, who loved beauty, had to change into new clothes early in the morning. Zijia will go to the Shinjaku to buy some money. Ian, you have to pay for this money yourself. Speaking of this, Chen Ji couldn't help but hug his little sunny egg tightly. He was a soft-hearted person. He couldn't bear to see these girls crying and wiping their tears in front of him. However, a person must have principles. For example, Chen Xiaoji's principle was, you can mess up my hair, I will tolerate you, but you must not touch my wallet, I will fight you to the death. Chen Gonggong's stinginess was also well known in the Shangfu Bureau. In fact, with his official position, his monthly salary was very high, and he had the filial piety of the servants and palace maids every now and then. It was reasonable to say that he was also a small nouveau riche, but he was the biggest miser in the Shangfu Bureau. No matter what he encountered, he would not spare a single cent even if he was beaten to death. At this time, hearing that Chen Ji was willing to go to the Shinjaku to buy some money, Yang Yunyor immediately wiped her tears and handed her purse to Chen Ji. Although he was stingy, he was not greedy, so Yang Yunyor was not afraid of Chen Ji. Shaking the purse that Yang Yunyor handed to him, Chen Ji frowned. Is this all you have saved? Is it not enough? Yang Yunyor's face also changed, and then she suddenly thought of something. Chen Gonggong, I can go raise money. At this time, Yang Yunyor naturally thought of Yang Yuqing, who was working in Liu Gairan's palace. Chen Gonggong, you must wait for me, I will go raise money now. Chapter 164. Imperial Harem, Literary Splendor Residence. Liu Guiren, who was once favored by His Majesty, lived here. Why did it have to be said that it was once? Because ever since Liu Guiren, who could sing and dance, entered the palace, His Majesty rarely summoned Liu Guiren to serve him. The atmosphere in Literary Splendor Residence has been very depressing these past few days, and today was a bit strange. Yuqing, did you really find out? At this time, Liu Guiren was letting the palace maid beside her dress up. A bright palace dress set off her fair and delicate face, making her look very charming and charming. At this time, hearing Liu Gairan's question, Yang Yuqing, who had been standing respectfully to the side, immediately replied in a low voice. Replying to Master, this slave inquired clearly that Liu Guiren offended the emperor's face and was executed. Today, because His Majesty was in a bad mood, he started a massacre in the imperial harem. Both Jingyun Palace and the Shangfu Bureau were affected. When she said this, Yang Yuqing's voice trembled. Liu Guiren raised her beautiful eyes and looked at Yang Yuqing's small face slightly. Yuqing, I remember that your sister works in the Shangfu Bureau, right? Is she okay? Thank you for your concern. This slave. When this slave just went out to inquire, His Majesty's people were still surrounding the Shangfu Bureau. I don't know what the situation inside is like. At this point, Yang Yuqing's face couldn't help but show a bit of worry. She and Yang Yunuo were not sisters, but thanks to her care in the past year, Yang Yuqing was not without feelings for her. Of course, Yang Yuqing, as a concubine daughter of the Yang family, had been treated coldly by others since she was a child. She had long seen through the fickleness of the world. Don't look at how she was a month younger than Yang Yunuo, she was already very scheming. Now, she behaved like this in front of Liu Guiren. First, she wanted Liu Guiren to see how much she valued friendship and loyalty. Second, she planned to take the opportunity to ask for permission to visit the Shangfu Bureau again. What if she was lucky enough to meet His Majesty there? Liu Guiren didn't know Yang Yuqing's thoughts at this time. She was indeed deceived by Yang Yuqing's immature face. Liu Guiren was naturally very happy to learn that Yu Guiren was dead, but His Majesty was a bit abnormal today. In Liu Guiren's impression, His Majesty had always been very calm and his character was not tyrannical. What crime did Yu Guiren commit to make His Majesty so angry? The Tranquil Cloud Palace was the resting palace of honored consort Shu. She was already an imperial consort, so the power behind her naturally could not be underestimated. Today, His Majesty had actually massacred the Tranquil Cloud Palace. Then, what was the connection? Needless to say, the women in the harem must have a certain level of reasoning ability. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know how they died. Liu Guiren pondered for a long time but still couldn't find the connection between Yu Guiren and Xu Fei. At this time, an inner attendant of Flourishing Literature residence hurried into the room and whispered a few words in Liu Guiren's ear. Liu Guiren couldn't help raising his eyes to look at Yang Yuqing. Yuqing, your sister has come to see you. Go and see what she wants. Yang Yunuo came. Hearing Liu Guiren's words, Yang Yuqing immediately left in a hurry and then quickly walked out of the dormitory. Outside Wenhua House, Yang Yunuo was anxiously pacing back and forth at the gate. Sister. Yang Yuqing's face flashed when she saw Yang Yunuo's expression. She was very familiar with Yang Yunuo's expression. It seemed that something had really happened to the Shangfu Bureau. Yuqing. Seeing Yang Yuqing's face, Yang Yunuo immediately grabbed her sister's hand and said anxiously, Yuqing, you must save Xiao Wan, save her. Something happened to Su Wan? Could it be? Yang Yuqing's expression was firm and she patted Yang Yunuo's hand hard. Sister, speak slowly. Did something happen in the Shangfu Bureau? While Yang Yunuo and Yang Yuqing were discussing how to rescue Su Wan had already followed Wang Yi to the Shinjaku, which was located in the innermost secluded corner of the imperial city and was the dirtiest and worst place in the entire imperial city. When the supervisor nanny of the Shinjaku saw that Steward Wang had personally brought people over, she immediately ran out of the door with small steps and came to Wang Yi. Steward Wang, why did you come in person? Bai Mama, your bitter days are about to come to an end. Seeing Bai Mama's charming smile at herself, Wang Yi whispered with a slightly deeper meaning. This is. Bai Mama's eyes lit up and she subconsciously approached Wang Yi. She raised her hand and stuffed a banknote into Wang Yi's hand. Please guide me, Steward Wang. One of the rules of survival for the harem, no matter when and where, you must carry a purse, banknote, and a lot of light valuables with you. These things may be used at any time and sometimes can even save lives. Hey, Bai Mama is too polite. Wang Yi unexpectedly blocked the banknote and turned to look at Su Wan respectfully. Miss Su, this is the supervisor of the Shinjaku, Bai Mama. Hello, Bai Mama. Su Wan nodded at Bai Mama. Although Bai Mama had stayed in the Shinjaku for many years and hadn't developed much, her eyes were very sharp. Seeing that Wang Yi was so polite to Miss Su in front of her, Bai Mama naturally didn't dare to be arrogant. When she heard Su Wan's question, she immediately nodded and smiled. Hello, Miss Su. Hello, Miss Su. Steward Wang, Miss Su is. After Bai Mama greeted Su Wan, She looked at Wang Yi with a puzzled face. Wang Yi gently leaned over to Bai Mama's ear and whispered a few words. Bai Mama's face changed again and again, and finally, her whole face was a little distorted with excitement. Steward Wang, don't worry. Leave Miss Su to this servant. This servant will never let her lose a single hair. Hearing Bai Mama's answer, Wang Yi nodded with satisfaction. Okay, I have to go back and report to His Majesty. Having said this, Wang Yi couldn't help but look at Su Wn again and whispered in a low voice, Miss Su, do you have any words for this servant to pass on to His Majesty? Hearing Wang Yi's question, Su Wn smiled lightly and whispered in Wang Yi's ear. Wang Yi was stunned when he heard Su Wan's words, but he still nodded vigorously. Miss Su, please rest assured, this servant will definitely pass on your words to His Majesty. This servant will take his leave now. With that, Wang Yi turned and strode away. Seeing that Wang Yi had gone far away, Bai Mama had a gentle face and looked at Su Wn with a smile. Miss Su, this Shinjaku is very simple and crude. If you don't mind, you can temporarily stay in this old servant's room. Don't worry, this old servant will keep the room very clean and all the supplies will be replaced with new ones. No need to go through so much trouble. Su Wn also smiled at Bai Mama. Just prepare the worst and crudest room for me. Remember, the worse the better. Bai Mama. Miss Su, are you trying to torture yourself? Although she cursed in her heart, when she thought of what Steward Wang had promised her, as long as she served this master well, he would be able to transfer her out of the Shinjaku. With such a good opportunity in front of her, how could she give it up? Bai Mama clapped her hands. Miss, don't worry. There is nothing else in this Shinjaku, but dirty and messy places are everywhere. Please go. Hearing Bai Mama's words, Su Wn nodded with a smile. I am naturally reassured by Bai Mama's work. In the future, Su Wn will have to thank Bai Mama for taking care of me here. Also, I hope Bai Mama won't tell anyone about anything that happened here. Words must not be passed to 6 ears, the second rule of the harem. This old servant understands, Miss Su can rest assured. With that said, Bai Mama immediately straightened up and shouted, Little girl, let me tell you, once you enter my Shinjaku, you have to listen to me, Bai Mama's words. Do you think this is still your Shangfu bureau? You really don't know what's good for you. I guess you can only stay here for the rest of your life. Hurry up and follow me. While speaking, Bai Mama had already arrogantly led Su Wan into the gate of the Shinjaku. In this harem, there was really no shortage of anything but men, especially characters with superb acting skills. Any random palace maid could probably be qualified as a movie queen in modern times. In the Shinjaku, a group of palace maids who were about to go out saw Bai Mama's figure and all bowed respectfully. When they saw the young Su Wan behind her, they all showed a look of pity. What kind of place was this Shinjaku? In the entire imperial city, even in the imperial palace and the imperial mausoleum, the most arduous and tiring tasks, such as cleaning toilets and pouring out night incense, were the responsibility of the Shinjaku. They had always been the group of people who worked the hardest, had the smallest monthly salary, and had the lowest status. There were many palace maids who were sentenced to the Shinjaku at first and thought that they could get out after their sentence was completed. However, in less than a month after entering this place, their bodies were already in poor health. The masters never lacked people to order around. Over time, they had long forgotten about you. Once you came in, you couldn't get out. Under everyone's sympathetic and pitiful eyes, Su Wan first followed Bai Mama into the room. This was the rule that every newcomer had to go through. It was said to be lectured by Bai Mama, but in fact, it was to show filial piety to Bai Mama. If you have a lot of silver, then you can do some less tiring work. If you don't have silver, not only will you be sent to do the most bitter and tiring work, but you will also be beaten up by Mama. Spare me, Mama. Not long after, sure enough, Su Wan's miserable scream came from the room. The people in the courtyard silently looked at each other, no one spoke, and some people's eyes carried a smile of schadenfreude. Finally, a newcomer came. This task of cleaning the toilet, I won't continue to do it, right? Chapter 165. It was night and the moonlight was bright. Su Wan sat in the narrow and simple room that Bai Mema had specially prepared for herself. She was bored and counted the stars in the sky through the broken window. Just as she counted to 101, the broken wooden door was suddenly blown open by a gust of wind and a slender figure appeared in front of Su Wn like a ghost. Seeing Su Rui suddenly appear in front of her wearing casual clothes, Su Wn stood up and smiled at him. "You're here?" En. Su Rui stared at Su Wan and also looked at everything in the room. How do people live in this place? His brows furrowed tightly and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. This is just a facade for Yang Yunyor to see. Who said I want to live here? Su Wan raised her eyebrows at Su Rui. Don't you want me to sleep with you? Or, which concubine are you going to recruit to the Chenkuan Palace to serve you? There's no such thing. Of course, I want to sleep with my wife. It's getting late, haven't you eaten yet? Su Wan interrupted Su Rui's words. When Wang Yi left in the morning, Su Wan specifically told him to tell His Majesty not to eat dinner before coming over at night. And Su Rui naturally did as Su Wan said. Hearing Su Wan's words, he subconsciously touched his stomach. I haven't eaten yet. Xiao Wan, what do you want to eat with me? There's still time. Now, you have to help me do something. Su Wan picked up a set of old servant clothes from her narrow wooden bed. You change your clothes first and then help me do some work. If you do well, I will personally cook delicious food for you tonight. There's actually this kind of treatment. Hearing Su Wan's words, Su Rui immediately changed his clothes with a smile and then looked at his wife with a gentle face. Xiao Wan, what do you want me to help you do? Sweep the courtyard or chop firewood? Well, it's nothing, just clean the toilets in the nearby palace. Su Wan blinked a pair of clear black eyes and looked at Su Rui with a serious face. Her tone was still so indifferent and calm. Sweep the toilets? Wife, are you joking? Look into my eyes, I'm serious. Su Wan stared at Su Rui with a serious expression. Now that the entire Shinjaku knows that I offended by Mama, I naturally have to do the dirtiest and most tiring work. Although it sounded reasonable, Su Rui felt that his wife was looking at him a bit strangely. Could it be a trap? Isn't it just cleaning the toilet? At least it's better than pouring night incense, right? There was nothing in this world that could baffle our General Su. For the sake of his wife, for the sake of the delicacies his wife had personally made, General Su was willing to give it his all. Seeing that Su Rui really took the tools in the courtyard and went out, Su Wan didn't follow. She knew that Su Rui was a person who always did things as he said. He wouldn't lie and disdained to lie. Not long after, Su Rui came back with a cold expression. As soon as he entered the room, there was an unpleasant smell. Seeing his disdainful expression, Su Wan covered her mouth and smiled. Don't look so serious. I'll help you change your clothes. Let's go back to Chenkuan Palace, okay? Su Rui answered sullenly. He had to take a good bath after going back. The moon was in the middle of the sky and the Chenkuan Palace was hazy. After Su Rui brought Su Wan back, he dismissed the people around him. Other than Wang Yi, no one else knew that there was another person in the palace. Soaking in the warm water and smelling the fragrance of the bath soup, Su Rui finally sighed comfortably. Are you done bathing? At this time, Su Wan's voice suddenly rang. Su Rui looked up to see Su Wan wearing a white undergarment. Her hair was scattered and she was holding a bowl of soup, smiling as she walked over. Right now, the owner of Su Wan's body wasn't even 15 years old. Although she had reached the marriageable age in the Great Shang dynasty, her face was still a bit immature and her figure hadn't fully developed. Under the snow-white undergarment, the slightly exquisite figure that belonged to a young girl made General Su turn his face away. Nani, he couldn't continue looking. It was easy to commit a crime if he looked for too long. Are you hungry? At this time, Su Wan was already sitting by the bathtub, her snow-white feet making a string of splashes on the water surface. Come here, I'll feed you the soup. I made it myself. Oh. Su Rui swam to Su Wan's side naked. Seeing him look up at her with sparkling eyes, Su Wan couldn't help but be in a good mood. She scooped a spoonful of soup and gently handed it to Su Rui. Seeing that Su Rui had finished the soup, Su Wan smiled at him. Does it taste good? It does. Su Rui nodded. His wife made the best soup in the world. It's good. Drink it all. Saying this, Su Wn scooped another spoonful of soup for Su Rui. She looked at the misty bathtub through the swaying bead curtain. The scene of the two getting along was exceptionally warm. Just that, a quarter of an hour later. Wife. Su Rui's voice was a bit hoarse and his gaze towards Su Wn became a bit gloomy. What did you use to make the soup? Oh, you can't tell? Su Wn slightly lowered her eyes and looked at Su Rui in the water. I just used some common tonics. Ginseng, deer penis, and so on. Didn't you like it a lot in Jin Qin Wang Fu? The word like was heavily emphasized by Su Wan. Hearing Su Wan's words, Su Rui's expression immediately changed. What happened to the gentle, virtuous, and considerate wife? Su Wan, you did it on purpose. You definitely did it on purpose. Wife, Su Rui climbed out of the bathtub and didn't bother to put on a robe. He directly hugged Su Wan's slightly cold body. I feel uncomfortable. I know you feel uncomfortable. Su Wan turned over and broke free from Su Rui's embrace. Then she looked at Wang Yi, who had been treating her as a background board not too far away. Steward Wang, bring the Imperial Concubine's card over. Wang Yi. What was with this inexplicable feeling of being shot while lying down? Wang Yi, get out. Without waiting for Wang Yi to move, Su Rui had already pulled up the robe on the ground. While pulling Su Wan to the dragon bed, he coldly shouted in a low voice. Understood. Wang Yi wiped the sweat on his forehead and quickly retreated. In front of the dragon bed, Su Rui threw Su Wan on the bed. Speak, what other moves do you have? Nothing. Su Wan innocently spread out her hands. Facing her husband, she couldn't bear to be ruthless. Tormenting him like this today was just because. That little bit of jealousy in her heart. She wouldn't allow anyone to touch her man. No more moves. Hearing Su Wan's answer and seeing her innocent expression lying on the bed, Su Rui couldn't help but take a deep breath. Since you're not going to torment me, then sleep. As he spoke, he lifted a corner of the brocade quilt and skillfully wrapped Su Wan's entire body with the quilt, pushing her to the innermost side of the bed. I'll cultivate for a bit. You sleep first. Seeing Su Rui sitting cross-legged on the bed planning to adjust his breathing, Su Wan rolled in the quilt like a small silkworm and rolled to Su Rui's side. Su Rui, you'll sleep with me? Hearing his wife's pitiful invitation, Su Rui's breath sank and he once again rolled Su Wan to the innermost side of the bed. Su Wan, go to sleep. Oh, then you should sleep early too. Don't tire yourself out. Seeing that Su Rui was so determined, Su Wan could only obediently shrink into a corner and close her eyes. Last night, her body had suffered for an entire night. Today, she could finally sleep well. Not long after, Su Wan entered dreamland. Seeing that Su Wan had fallen asleep, Su Rui then closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. Not long after, his body was covered in sweat. Su Wan, how much did you add to the soup? General Su began to regret rejecting Su Wan too straightforwardly. But when he opened his eyes again and saw the exceptionally peaceful face sleeping on the bed, Su Rui's gaze involuntarily softened. Forget it, isn't it just adjusting her breathing for a night? It's not a big deal, as long as she doesn't talk about flipping the sign again and again in the future. Thinking like this, Su Rui once again closed his eyes and cultivated. In the middle of the night, the candlelight in the bedroom flickered. When Su Rui was concentrating on cultivating, Su Wan, who was in the bed, woke up at some point. A pair of clear eyes stared at Su Rui's back without blinking. Looking and looking, Su Wan couldn't help but curve her lips and once again closed her eyes to sleep peacefully. In this world, it's so good to have you. Before meeting Su Rui, she always felt that it didn't matter how she was by herself. But after meeting Su Rui, Su Wan increasingly felt that she couldn't leave him. She didn't dare to imagine what the world would be like without Su Rui. Just like Su Wan was General Su's reverse scale, Su Rui was also the forbidden area that Su Wan couldn't touch. Chapter 166. When Su Wan opened her eyes the next day, she found that she had returned to the small room in the Shinjaku, and she was still wrapped in a thick and warm tribute blanket. "Miss Su, are you up?" Bai Mama's voice just sounded outside the room. Because Su Wan's room was in the innermost part of the Shinjuku courtyard and its location was also remote, Bai Mama was not afraid of others seeing her here. "Mama, please come in." Su Wn folded the blanket and placed it under the coarse quilt, and then slowly began to put on her clothes. The servants of the Shinjuku wore the lowest grade of cloth clothes, which were very prickly on the body. Fortunately, Bai Mama had already done something to the clothes. Although Su Wan's clothes looked the same as others from the outside, the inside of the clothes was sewn with soft satin. This kind of thing to deceive people was very common in the palace, so there was no need to spend time to prepare. Su Wn hadn't put on the outer palace dress when Bai Mama came in with toiletries. "Good morning, Miss Su. Did you sleep well last night?" Facing Su Wn, Bai Mama's posture was very low. "Thank you for your concern, Mama. I slept very well," Su Wn replied softly, and Bai Mama's gaze swept over Su Wan's bed. When she saw the corner of the blanket exposed under the quilt, her eyes changed and the smile on her face became more eager. "Miss, the Shinjuku is really simple and crude. Let this old slave serve you to freshen up." "All right." Seeing Bai Mama's enthusiasm, Su Wan naturally nodded her head. In the harem, if someone fawns over you, it proves that you are doing well and have value. At this time, in the face of others' goodwill, you must not refuse, because no matter what reason you have to refuse others, it is likely to be misunderstood as looking down on them. This is a taboo for people in the harem. No one knows who will be down and out in the next second, and no one knows who will be successful in the next moment. In the depths of the palace, you can only make friends and never make enemies. Su Wan has actually done a lot of tasks in the imperial palace. She has long been clear about the ways of the harem. She also knows that Bai Mama's treatment of herself was naturally ordered by Wang Yi. If she doesn't give her this opportunity, I'm afraid she will always be anxious, right? Under the service of Bai Mama, Su Wan simply washed up. After finishing some, Bai Mama packed up the things and looked at Su Wan with a smile again. "Miss Su, what do you want to eat for breakfast? This old servant has a small kitchen. If you don't mind, this old servant can cook for you. I'm not picky about food. Nanny, if someone comes to ask about me today, you know what to say, right?" Su Wan sat on the wooden bed and raised her eyelids to look at Bai Mama. Bai Mama was a little scared by her gaze. "You say, this little girl has delicate features, but why is her eyes so penetrating when she looks at people?" "This old servant knows what to say. Miss, you can rest assured." Bai Mama patted her chest and repeatedly assured Su Wan. That's good." Also, Su Wan narrowed her eyes and whispered again, "If someone comes to plead for me, don't agree without this amount." Looking at Su Wan waving her palm, Bai Mama couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. 500 taels? She had worked in the Shinjuku for all these years, but she had never received so much money at one time. 500 taels of silver was also a large amount of expenditure for an ordinary palace maid, and Su Wan knew very well that Yang Yunuor's monthly salary was sent back to her hometown to her family. There were many children in her family, and life was very difficult. Otherwise, she would not have been sold to Yang Fu as a maid. 500 taels of silver was definitely an astronomical figure for Yang Yunuor, and Holy Mother Yang had to take out the money in order to save Su Wan. So, now the question was, what should she do to borrow 500 taels of silver? "Come on, Holy Mother Yang, I'm optimistic about you Tilda." As Su Wan expected, before the morning was over, Chen Ji came to the Shinjuku with a smile on his face. "Isn't this Chen Gonggong? What wind blew you here?" Although they were both stewards, the Shangfu Bureau belonged to one of the 24 departments of the 6th Bureau and was a department with real power. Compared with the Shinjuku, which was despised by tens of thousands of people, it was absolutely like heaven and earth. Therefore, when Bai Mama saw Chen Ji, she immediately greeted him with a smile. "Bai Mama, I'm here to give you some hometown specialties." Chen Ji's phoenix eyes raised, but he appeared very amorous. Bai Mama looked at Chen Ji's smiling face, and her expression was a little strange. It must be said that this Chen Gonggong was also a weirdo. He had a girly appearance since he was a child. It was said that when he was a child, his family was poor and owed a lot of money to others. The creditor took a fancy to him and wanted to snatch him back to be his wife. Later, when he learned that he was a man, the man still didn't give up and actually wanted to take him back home to be a male attendant. At that time, Chen Ji was young but had a strong mind. On the night of the bridal chamber, he injured the man and then escaped in a hurry. At that time, the imperial city was selecting an inner attendant. In order to be afraid that the man would report him to the authorities and put him in prison, Chen Ji simply signed up and entered the palace to be an inner attendant. When he first entered the palace, Chen Ji was often bullied because of his fair and delicate appearance, but he never said a word. He always stabbed people from behind with a knife. Stabbing and stabbing, he entered the eyes of Steward Wang. Later, he was promoted all the way to the position of the steward of the Shangfu Bureau. This kind of resume can only be observed and not copied by Mama. Look at this Hatian jujube, it's very sweet this year. Chen Ji didn't pay attention to Bai Mama's strange expression and stuffed a small basket of jujubes into her hands. Bai Mama smiled and raised her hand to pick up the inconspicuous pouch in the basket without a trace. Her face was slightly embarrassed. Ari, Chen Gonggong, I'm old and my teeth aren't good. I can't eat dry, hard, and sweet things recently. Thank you for your kindness, but this thing, you should take it back. Hearing Bai Mama's words, Chen Ji's expression froze. He hadn't said what he wanted her to do and she refused so bluntly. What does this mean? Bai Mama, you're not giving Zijie a face As he said this, Chen Ji's face gradually became cold. Ari, Chen Gonggong, don't worry, let's talk further. Bai Mama carefully pulled Chen Ji to the corner outside the door. You should be here for that girl Su Wan this time, right? Exactly. Chen Ji nodded and couldn't help but look at Bai Mama. Did someone else come? This. You don't have to worry about it. She was personally brought by Steward Wang. Steward Wang repeatedly told me to discipline her well. I really don't dare to make the decision without authorization unless. Speaking of this, the smile on Bai Mama's face was somewhat meaningful. Seeing her smile, Chen Ji immediately understood. Don't beat around the bush with Zijie, say a number. Helping others do things, Chen Ji didn't feel distressed about the money. At this time, he put on a look of indifference. About this, Bai Mama smiled and raised her hand to fan her face. Seeing her action, Chen Ji couldn't help but whisper, Bai Mama, you're asking for an exorbitant price, aren't you afraid of being too full? Bai Mama just smiled brightly. Do you think she's willing? Isn't this what Great Aunt ordered? Seeing that Bai Mama just smiled and didn't speak, Chen Ji frowned again. Just this number, can't it be less? Not a single cent less. Bai Mama's face also became serious. The risk this time is too great. Even if I get this silver, this old servant can only try her best to deal with it. Seeing that Bai Mama was sincere, Chen Ji had to nod. Okay, I understand. I'll go back and study it. Saying this, he tightened the basket in his hand and Chen Ji left with small steps. Chapter 167. In the Imperial Study Room. Many of these memorials came from the Southern faction in the court. The Southern faction was the die-hard faction headed by the Southern Imperial Censor. They had always been the group of people who gave Dongfang Yarrow the most headaches. After the original owner ascended the throne, these old guys gave him a lot of trouble. But in the face of these two veterans, they also had the support of the Empress Dowager, so Dongfang Yarrow could only endure. However, she didn't expect these old fellows to stretch their hands so far. They even meddled in the Emperor's harem. Su Rui smiled coldly at the remonstrations on the table that reprimanded him for being too tyrannical. What was tyrannical? You people don't know what true tyrannical is. You're just a group of self-righteous stubborn old men who flaunt their seniority. Dongfang Yarrow cared about old sentiments and wanted to stabilize the court. He had to compromise with the people of the Southern faction, but now that Su Rui had become Dongfang Yarrow, he didn't care about the advice of these people. If he really couldn't do it, he would just kill them all. So what? Your Majesty. Wang Yi, who was originally guarding outside the study, quickly came to Su Rui's side, bowed, lowered his head and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, someone from the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful has come. The Empress Dowager summons you to the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful to eat together." Empress Dowager? I am very busy and have no time. Regarding the current Empress Dowager, Su Rui didn't have the slightest favorable impression. The Empress Dowager, who was widowed at a young age, has been in close contact with her relatives and has always wanted to influence the politics of the court. More importantly, she is not Dongfang Yao's biological mother. Naturally, the mother and son are not of the same mind. Wang Yi wasn't surprised. Her Majesty had been too abnormal these days. Wang Yi, who had accepted too many surprises, had learned to be very calm. Didn't he just reject the Empress Dowager? Wasn't this what His Majesty had always wanted to do but never had the chance to do? Thinking of that person in the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful, Wang Yi couldn't help but frown. When the former emperor was still alive, she was so gentle, virtuous, and considerate. However, after the former emperor passed away and entrusted the current emperor to her, she immediately seemed to have changed into a different person. All day long, she was full of ambition, forming cliques for personal gain. What was wrong with being the empress? After Wang Yi left, Su Rui casually flipped through a few memorials. When he saw a certain memorials from the Imperial Army's general, Su Rui's movements froze and his gaze fell on a person's name. Chen Shengbei. He was Su Wan's fiancé in the original plot and also the male lead Daran of this world. And this memorial was written by the general of the Imperial Army, intending to promote some of his outstanding guards. Chen Shengbei was also included in this promotion. Su Rui furrowed his brows and looked at it for a long time. In the end, he still wrote the 2 words approved on it. As for the other memorials, they were all ignored by General Su. Harem, Shangfu Bureau. After such a big incident yesterday, several people died in the Shangfu Bureau. Now, there was a serious shortage of manpower. Liao Xi was taking Yang Yunuo to the Ministry of Internal Affairs to look at the roster of some new palace maids. She planned to screen some little palace maids with good needlework to supplement the manpower of the Shangfu Bureau. Xu Bingyu. In the palace maid roster, Yang Yunuo unexpectedly saw Xu Bingyue's name. When she was at the Imperial Hospital that day, she got to know the little palace maid and knew that she and Su Wn sent her to the Imperial Hospital together. Later, she also told her that her full name was Xu Bingyu. "Yunuo, do you know her?" Hearing Yang Yunuo's voice, Liao Xi turned to look at her and asked doubtfully. Replying to Liao Xi, "Yesterday, this servant contracted a cold." It was she and Su Wan who sent this servant to the Imperial Hospital together. Speaking of this, Yang Yunuo couldn't help but think of Su Wan who was sent to the Shinjaku. Her expression immediately became worried. "I wonder how Su Wan is doing over there. Her health is not good, I wonder if she can endure it." Because the Shangfu Bureau was too busy today, Yang Yunuo didn't have time to meet with Chen Ji, and she didn't know how things were going on his side. Hearing Yang Yunuo's worried words, Liao Xi just sighed in her heart. Su Wan was also a good seedling, but she offended His Majesty. Although it was only said that she was sent to the Shinjaku for a month, when the time came, without His Majesty's verbal order, who would dare to let her out privately? "Yunuo, in this deep palace, everyone is rootless duckweed. Everyone has their own destiny. You just need to take care of yourself." Liao Xi could see that Yang Yunuo was too kind-hearted and soft-hearted. She would give her a few words from time to time, lest she lose her life because she didn't trust others in the future. Hearing Liao Xi's words, Yang Yunuo moved her lips but did not speak. She knew that Liao Xi had her own way of doing things, but Yang Yunuo also had her own principles. She knew that Su Wan suffered such a punishment because of her, so she had to find a way to rescue her no matter what. "Since you know this Xu Bingyu, what do you think of her?" Seeing that Yang Yunuo did not speak, Liao Xi's gaze fell on the palace maid roster in her hand. "Bingyu is very kind and enthusiastic. She is a good girl." Yang Yunuo thought of Xu Bingyue's face in her memory and couldn't help but say a few good words for her. "Since you think she is good, let her replace Su Wan and go to work with you." Liao Xi still trusted Yang Yunuo very much. Seeing Liao Xi put a check mark on Xu Bingyue's name, Yang Yunyor's face also showed a happy smile. At this time, Holy Mother Yang would never think that in the near future, Xu Bingyu would become her biggest enemy in this life. Shinjaku Su Wn, who stayed in the room all morning with nothing to do, simply strolled around the courtyard of the Shinjaku. This place was different from the laundry bureau. The palace servants of the laundry bureau had to wash clothes in the courtyard every day and could only stay in the same place from morning to night. Most of the people in the Shinjaku worked outside and only came back at night or when it was time to eat. At noon, the courtyard of the Shinjaku was empty. The withered yellow leaves were also blown to the ground by the autumn wind. The fallen leaves all over the ground made the already lonely courtyard even more desolate. Su Wan strolled around the courtyard. When she walked to the gate, she saw a sneaky figure looking around outside the door of the Shinjaku. Su Wan frowned and did not intend to pay attention to it, but at this time, the little palace maid in blue at the door saw Su Wan's figure. She quickly waved at her and whispered, "Hey! This younger sister, please speak further." Su Wan. Can I pretend that I didn't hear it? Younger sister. This younger sister. Seeing that Su Wan completely ignored her and turned to go back, the little palace maid was also anxious. She looked around, quickly rushed into the gate of the Shinjaku, and then forcefully pulled Su Wan to the corner outside the door. "This younger sister, elder sister has something to ask you." While speaking, the palace maid had already stuffed some broken silver into Su Wan's hand. The monthly salary of the palace maids in the Shinjaku was only half of that of the low-ranking palace maids. Although these broken silver pieces were small, it was also an unexpected fortune in their eyes. The palace maid dressed in blue brocade was waiting for Su Wan to reveal a flattering smile to her. In the end, Su Wan just silently put away the silver and indifferently looked at her. "You ask, I don't know much." In fact, she knew nothing about the people in the Shinjaku, okay? Ah. The little palace maid quickly reacted after listening to Su Wan's words and asked quickly, "Do you know that a new palace maid named Su Wan came to your Shinjaku yesterday?" Su Wan's eyes flashed when she heard her name, and then she nodded lightly. "I know." "Then do you know why she entered the Shinjaku?" The palace maid in blue went on to ask, as if afraid of being seen by others. Her tone became faster and faster. "I heard that she offended His Majesty." Su Wan continued to answer unhurriedly, and her eyes took the opportunity to glance at the little palace maid. She was not old, but she was wearing a brocade palace dress, and the headdress in her hair was also expensive. If Su Wan did not guess wrong, she should be the palace maid in charge of a certain imperial concubine, and this imperial concubine was most likely. "Do you know what she did to offend His Majesty?" The inquiry of the palace maid in blue interrupted Su Wan's thoughts. "I don't know." Su Wan shook her head innocently. "She didn't say this, and it's not good for us to ask." Hearing Su Wan's answer, the palace maid in blue hesitated and took out some broken silver pieces and stuffed them into Su Wan's hand. "Help me find out the reason why she was punished today. I will come here again at this time tomorrow. If you can find out, I will reward you generously." "Reward?" Su Wan's eyes flashed. "Okay, I still don't know how to address you, sister." "Me?" The palace maid in blue hesitated for a moment, but still said in a low voice, "You can call me Sister Wn Shin. I will leave first. You must remember what I entrusted you with. Wait for me here tomorrow." As she spoke, Wn Shin looked around with a guilty conscience. Then, she quickly left in a flash. Wn Shin, the palace maid in charge of Shoning Palace, one of concubine Liang's confidants. Su Wan stared at the direction where Wn Shin left. Thinking of the concubine Liang that she had never met, she specifically sent someone to inquire about her news. Was it simply curious about the bloody incident in the harem? Or was it because she had a discerning eye for talent, and was staring at her at this time? Chapter 168. Shoning Palace. After Wn Shin came back from the Shinjaku, she immediately entered Liang Fei's bedroom. At this time, Liang Fei was half lying on the chaise lounge looking at a drawing book. Hearing Wn Shin's hurried footsteps, her eyes flashed, and her lily-white hand gently flipped the drawing book in her hand and put it aside. "Master." WN Shin carefully leaned against the chaise lounge, bent over and whispered a few words in Liang Fei's ear. Liang Fei nodded, and her beautiful red phoenix eyes flashed. WN Shin, you did a good job, remember to be on time tomorrow. Yes. WN Shin nodded, and then whispered hesitantly, Master, about the Prime Minister's residence. Ben Gong will write a letter to Uncle, telling him not to act rashly. His Majesty's actions these 2 days have a deep meaning. I'm afraid that the stubborn old fogies of the southern faction will not be able to sit still, and Ben Gong also heard that the person in the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful is very angry today, hey. Sneering twice, Liang Fei slowly sat up straight with the help of WN Shin. Ben Gong really can't make up my mind about Yu Gairen's death, but the matter of Jingyun Palace and the Shangfu Bureau must be involved. You must help Ben Gong find out the truth. Knowing oneself and knowing the enemy was the only way to win 100 battles. Liang Fei was born into a noble family in the capital. Her father was the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, and her uncle was the left prime minister of the current dynasty. She was familiar with military books and had excellent literary talent. When she was young, many children of officials came to marry her. Unfortunately, in the end, she still followed her uncle's request and entered the palace as a concubine. Because of her good family background, she became an imperial concubine when she first entered the palace and was in love with Dongfang Yarrow for a period of time, but over time, Dongfang Yarrow began to alienate her. In fact, Liang Fei understood in her heart that the emperor did not like her at all. He made her an imperial concubine just because of her family's face. Even the initial favor was just to make her stay in the harem. For a woman as intelligent as Liang Fei, Dongfang Yarrow would not give her the chance to be favored in the 6 palaces or even to have children. In this lifetime, as long as her maiden family did not fall, she would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of her life, until she died of old age in this harem. If unfortunately, her family declined, what awaited her was the ruined courtyard of the cold palace. In fact, it was just this. If it was a normal woman, she would be content with the situation, but concubine Liang was not willing. She had a body full of talent, but there was no place for her to use it. She was not willing to be a cold concubine in this huge harem that no one cared about. Did His Majesty not like her? It didn't matter. She could cultivate her own power. She wanted to personally cultivate a beautiful concubine and stir up the harem. The night was hazy. Most of the people in the Shinjaku had already lined up to take a bath after a day of tiring work, and then couldn't wait to go back to their rooms to rest. Su Wan did not return to her room at this time. Instead, she was in a daze in the backyard. Not long after, a familiar figure floated over. Seeing Su Rui's grey inner attendant attire, Su Wan widened her eyes with a smile. Your Majesty, what are you playing at? Role-playing? Ahem. Su Rui coughed twice and said seriously, what else is there to do today? Wife, just tell me what to do. Su Wan. It felt like General Su really regarded himself as an outstanding model worker in the country. What about tonight? Does serving me in the bath count? Su Wan tugged at her clothes in disgust. I've stayed here for 2 days and I'm going to die of filth from head to toe. Since your Majesty loves labor so much, help me bathe and change my clothes. If you do well, there will be a reward. Reward and what not? Su Rui's face was full of black lines. It won't be a big tonic soup again, right? Seeing General Su's suspicious appearance, Su Wan felt particularly good. Of course, not. That's good, that's good. As soon as he heard that his wife finally stopped using big moves, General Su immediately happily carried his wife back to the big bathroom in the palace to take a bath. After taking a bath, Su Wan pulled Wang Yi to the small kitchen to fiddle with things. When she came back again, she was holding a bowl of soup in her hand. Su Rui, didn't you say that there was no big tonic soup? Seeing that even Su Rui's face changed, Su Wan smiled and brought the soup bowl to the table. Then do you want to drink or not? Drink. Su Rui nodded hard. As a result, as soon as the soup entered his mouth, the mellow taste immediately made his knitted eyebrows stretch out. Wife, this is, to get rid of your impurities. Su Wan smiled and shrugged her shoulders, then she strolled to the desk in the warm room and looked at the memorials piled on the table. She casually flipped through them and saw that they were all remonstrations from the imperial censorate. Su Wan couldn't help but curl her lips. Being an emperor is really tiring. Externally, he had to deal with the major events of the imperial court, balance the forces of the various parties in the court, and guard against the internal strife of the various vassal kings. Internally, the women in the harem fought endlessly all day long, and there was also an ambitious empress dowager eyeing him covetously from the side. Ari, Dongfang Yarrow being an emperor was really bitter. Tilda hearing Su Wan's sigh. Su Rui on the side was non-committal. He had been a vassal king who changed the dynasty and usurped the throne, and he had also been a general who led troops to rebel. Being an emperor, this was really the first time. General Su really didn't like this position, but since ancient times, there were countless people who broke their heads and racked their brains to sit on this dragon throne. Speaking of which, Dongfang Li was estimated to enter the palace again in a few days. His Royal Highness Rui Wang had always been eyeing this throne covetously, waiting to catch Dongfang Yarrow's mistakes. Now that Dongfang Yarrow had started a massacre in the harem, he had already provoked the dissatisfaction of the southern faction and the Empress Dowager. If Dongfang Li didn't take the opportunity to do something, he would be unworthy of his villain boss setting. Thinking about Dongfang Li in his heart, Su Rui's eyes couldn't help but become complicated. Should that disaster be killed directly to save trouble, or should he keep him for other purposes? Master. Wang Yi's voice suddenly came from afar. He walked in quickly from outside the hall, his body still carrying the chill of the night. Master, the Empress Dowager has come. Su Rui raised his eyes coldly. This Empress Dowager was really impatient. She couldn't keep her cool so quickly, rushing to the palace in the middle of the night. Master, look, Miss Su, she. Seeing that Su Rui didn't speak, Wang Yi's eyes glanced in Su Wan's direction. I'm going to sleep. Su Wan shrugged her shoulders, put down the memorial in her hand, and directly entered the inner room of the palace. She put down the bright yellow embroidered canopy and her whole person disappeared on the dragon bed. The Empress Dowager has arrived. At this time, the announcement also sounded, and then the Empress Dowager majestically walked in with 10 palace maids and 10 inner servants. Empress Dowager Jinan. Wang Yi directly knelt down and greeted loudly. The Empress Dowager coldly looked at Su Rui, who was still sitting at the table and drinking the soup slowly, and a trace of coldness flashed across her mouth. Yarrow, didn't you see Imperial Mother? Ah. Hearing the Empress Dowager's words, Su Rui lazily raised his eyes. Zhen's eyes aren't blind. Of course, I see Empress Dowager. You. Yarrow, you're getting more and more excessive these 2 days. This harem is under the jurisdiction of Ari Jia. It's fine if you casually ordered Noble Yu to die, but yesterday, you even killed Empress Shu. Moreover, in the Shangfu Bureau, you killed 4 people in a row without saying a word. Do you know that your atrocities have already spread to the imperial court? Many old ministers are very dissatisfied and have already sent memorials to Ari Jia's palace. Speaking to this point, the Empress Dowager's gaze was sharp and her tone was aggressive. Zhen killed people. This world is Zhen's. Zhen can kill whoever he wants. If they're dissatisfied, they can tell Zhen personally. Zhen will kill them until they all shut up. After finishing his wife's love soup, Su Rui then took out a bright yellow brocade handkerchief. While elegantly wiping his mouth, he slightly raised his eyebrows and looked at the Empress Dowager in front of him who was wearing a dignified dress. Empress Dowager, if you're very free, then raise flowers and feed the fish. If you feel lonely, Zhen doesn't mind you casually choosing an imperial uncle to remarry. As for the matters of the imperial court and harem, that's Zhen's matter. Empress Dowager, you don't need to worry about it. Absurd. Hearing Su Rui's words, the Empress Dowager's dignified face changed color. Yarrow, you're becoming more and more absurd. Before your imperial father passed away, he entrusted you to Ari Jia. Ari Jia will never allow our Dongfang family's imperial court to decline in your hand. Such righteous words did sound quite reasonable, but Dongfang family? So Empress Dowager, you also know that this world belongs to the Dongfang family? Su Rui slowly stood up and coldly looked at the Empress Dowager's eyes from top to bottom. Zhen heard that the Yuan family has been very rampant in the capital recently. The foreign relatives are causing chaos in the country. Empress Dowager, you wouldn't also want to plot to usurp the throne, right? This is all slander, all rumors. Feeling the coldness emanating from Su Rui's body, the Empress Dowager couldn't help but take 2 steps back, and her tone also weakened. Ari Jiao wholeheartedly thinks for the late emperor and wholeheartedly assists His Majesty. Yarrow, don't tell me you still don't understand. Yes, Empress Dowager, you and Imperial Father have deep feelings for each other. Jin sees that you have been missing Imperial Father recently, missing him so much that your whole person is haggard. Speaking up to hear, Su Rui suddenly raised his lips and smiled. Wang Yi, pass on Jin's decree. The Empress Dowager is depressed because she misses the late emperor and is unwell. From today onwards, the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful will close its doors and refuse visitors. If anyone dares to disturb the Empress Dowager's recuperation, no matter who it is, they will all be sentenced to death. You, Dongfang Yarrow, you want to put Ari Jiao under house arrest? Hearing Su Rui's words, the Empress Dowager became excited. At this moment, she couldn't care less about the superficial effort and directly called out Dongfang Yarrow's name. Dongfang Yarrow, don't be too presumptuous, Ari Jiao. Come. The Empress Dowager is now emotionally agitated and her health is worrying. Still not hurrying to help her back. If anything happens to your master, none of you will be able to live. Chapter 169. The people of the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful came with great momentum, but they hurriedly left with their tails between their legs. After the people of the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful left, Su Rui directly drafted an imperial edict and let Wang Yi bring it to the guard camp. From today onwards, the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful will become the place where the Empress Dowager dies of old age. If she doesn't court death. Returning to the inner room, Su Wn was lifting the embroidered tent, holding her chin with both hands, lying on the dragon bed, blinking her eyes and staring at Su Rui's face. What's wrong? Su Rui was baffled by Su Wan's gaze and subconsciously touched his face. Didn't he wipe it just now? Your Majesty is too handsome, blinding this servant's eyes. Su Wn smiled at Su Rui. Who told her family's General Su to be so handsome? No matter how she looked, she couldn't get enough. Su Rui, it's not easy. Wife finally found out that I'm good. Cough. Su Rui coughed twice. Deliberately putting on a handsome and elegant posture, he walked to the bed step by step. Come, I won't charge you. I'll let you look a few more times. How about I take off my dragon robe and you look at my 8-pack? No. Su Wn heard Su Rui's words but desperately shook her head. Your Majesty's figure is too good. This servant will have a nosebleed if I look at it. General Su. Su Wn, your style changes too quickly. This general is a bit unable to adapt. Haha. Seeing Su Rui stunned on the bed, Su Wn couldn't help but laugh and pounced over, directly throwing General Su on the dragon bed. Your Majesty, you're such a feast for the eyes. No wonder the women in the harem fought to the death for you. This servant is so jealous. Silly wife, I only love you. If you don't like the women in the harem, I'll kill them all. What do you think? Su Rui raised his hands and hugged Su Wn, who was lying on his body, staring at her tenderly and lovingly. No, this way you'll become a tyrant and I'll become a witch who brings disaster to the country. Su Wn rubbed against Su Rui's chest. I know that I'm the only one in your heart. As for the women in the imperial harem, if they don't take the initiative to court death, Your Majesty, please be magnanimous and let them live. General Su, you're really a genius. You're able to turn a harem schemes into on the self-cultivation of a tyrant. All right, whatever you say. Su Rui turned over and pressed Su Wan under his body. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead. Be good. You've been tired all day. Sleep early. As he spoke, Su Rui turned around and laid by Su Wan's side, gently pulling the brocade quilt for her. Good night. Su Rui raised his arm and a gust of wind blew out all the candles in the inner room. In the suddenly dark bedroom, Su Wan subconsciously leaned into Su Rui's embrace. The two people tightly hugged each other and soon fell asleep peacefully. While Su Wan was sleeping comfortably in Su Rui's arms, Yang Yunuo was still running around to raise money for Su Wan. Yuqing, can you borrow a little more? Outside Wenhua residence, Yang Yunuo stood under the palace lantern and looked at Yang Yuqing anxiously. In the afternoon, Chen Ji had already conveyed by Mama's words to Yang Yunuo. 500 taels of silver was an astronomical figure for Yang Yunuo, whose monthly salary was only 10 taels. After borrowing from the Shangfu Bureau, Yang Yunuo only managed to borrow 40 or so taels, which wasn't even enough for a change. Now, she could only count on Yang Yuqing. Elder sister, I really tried my best. At this time, Yang Yuqing also had a helpless expression. Elder sister, you also know the situation of our Wenhua residence. His Majesty hasn't summoned our master for a long time. Without the Emperor's reward and master's mood isn't good, our days as servants are also not good. As she spoke, Yang Yuqing handed a small brocade box to Yang Yunuo. This is the hairpin that master gave me last month. Elder sister, take it and let the eunuch of the Ministry of Internal Affairs help resell it. It should be worth some silver. This, okay. Yang Yunuo hesitated, but in the end, she accepted the brocade box. Seeing that she accepted the thing, Yang Yuqing's eyes flashed. Elder sister, if you raise enough silver and want to go to Shinjuku to see Xiao Wan, can you call me? I'm also worried about her. Okay. Seeing that Yang Yuqing was so concerned about Su Wan, Yang Yunuo also felt happy. Although the three of them were not really related by blood, in this cold harem, the three of them could support each other and share weal and woe together. This was what Yang Yunuo wanted to see the most. Elder sister, I'll go back first. If I come out for too long, master will be unhappy. Seeing that her goal had been achieved, Yang Yuqing patted Yang Yunuo on the shoulder and immediately turned around and quickly entered the gate of Wenhua residence. Yang Yunuo saw that Yang Yuqing's figure had disappeared, so she slowly turned and walked towards the residence of the Shangfu Bureau. On the cold Imperial Road, a lonely figure, Yang Yunuo kept thinking about Su Wan along the way, imagining her very hard and tiring life in Shinjuku every day. Yang Yunuo subconsciously clenched the brocade box in her hand. Sister Yunuo? A crisp voice interrupted Yang Yunuo's thoughts. Yang Yunuo looked up and realized that she had unknowingly returned to the residence of the Shangfu Bureau, and the person who called her at this time was Xu Bingyu, who had just been recruited into the Shangfu Bureau this afternoon. Bingyu, you haven't slept yet? I'm a little too happy to sleep. Xu Bingyu smiled at Yang Yunuo. It's all thanks to Sister Yunuo's help that I can come to the Shangfu Bureau. In the future, Sister Yunuo, you will be my biological sister. While speaking, Xu Bingyu had already intimately held Yang Yunuo's arm. There were a lot of people in the Shangfu Bureau, but Liao Xi valued Yang Yunuo the most, especially after Su Rui killed the 4 people who often went against Su Wan and Yang Yunuo. In the Shangfu Bureau, Yang Yunuo's status also rose. Although Xu Bingyu had just come in, the little girl's ability to observe people's expressions was extraordinary. Now, she had made up her mind to hug Yang Yunuo's thigh tightly first. I didn't help much, but if you encounter any difficulties in the future, you can naturally tell me. Yang Yunuo reluctantly smiled at Xu Bingyu, and her tone was as sincere as ever. Xu Bingyu quickly noticed that Yang Yunuo was absent-minded. Her eyes turned and she thought of the reason. Sister, are you worried about Sister Su Wan's matter? Yes. Yang Yunuo sighed and subconsciously clenched the brocade box in her hand. I want to help Su Wan, but I still lack a lot of silver. Sister, this is all my family property. Without waiting for Yang Yunuo to finish speaking, Xu Bingyu did not hesitate to contribute her purse. Bingyu, this. Yang Yunuo looked at Xu Bingyu with surprise. Sister, you are a good person. Sister Su Wan is also a good person. I also want to help her. I don't have much silver, but I also want to do my best to help her. Xu Bingyu said with a serious face. Yang Yunuo felt that Xu Bingyu, who said these words under the moonlight, was particularly holy. Female lead, you really think too much. In fact, your Virgin Mary halo is too big, causing you to feel that the world is full of love and positive energy everywhere. In fact, the truth is that this harem is full of dense malice including Yang Yuqing, including Xu Bingyu, and even including Su Wan. After accepting Xu Bingyu as silver, Yang Yunyor immediately treated Xu Bingyu as a sister and couldn't help but tell Xu Bingyu the whole thing in detail. Hearing that it would cost 500 silver taels, Xu Bingyu couldn't help but secretly click her tongue. However, just because the palace maids don't have silver doesn't mean that others don't. Sister Yunyor, I know someone who can definitely take out this silver, but I don't know if he is willing to lend it to you.
Who?
Seeing that Xu Bingyu was speaking mysteriously, Yang Yunyor couldn't help but lean in front of her, nervously waiting for her answer. Lu Mushuan, Imperial Physician Lu. Xu Bingyu said Lu Mushuan's name in a low voice. Hearing her words, Yang Yunyor couldn't help but think of Lu Mushuan's gentle and handsome face. She had only interacted with him once. Although the people in the palace said that Imperial Physician Lu was a good person, would he be willing to lend so much silver to her? Sister Yunyor, I think Imperial Physician Lu is a very good person, and he treats you. He has seen you before and has an impression of you. Maybe he will help you. Why don't we find a chance to go to the Imperial Hospital tomorrow to find him? Xu Bingyu saw that Yang Yunyor was a little moved and couldn't help but take the opportunity to persuade her. In fact, ever since she saw Lu Mushuan in the Imperial Hospital, Xu Bingyu was a little moved. Chapter 170. On the third day of entering the Shinjaku, Su Wn still enjoyed the treatment of a nanny in the Shinjaku during the day, and at night, His Majesty the Emperor waited on her. This simple life made Wang Yi envious. Miss Su, you are really the most important servant in the world. Even the Empress Dowager of all the dynasties can't catch up to you. It's really pitiful for Yang Yunyor, who couldn't sleep well in order to save Su Wan, couldn't eat, and even lost a lot of her hair. According to Su Wan's estimation, with Yang Yunyor's character, it would be very difficult to raise 500 taels of silver, so she was ready to wait for her in the Shinjaku for a few more days. But what Su Wan didn't expect was that on the afternoon of the third day, Chen Ji rushed over with 500 taels of silver. Bai Mema received the money and naturally promised to take good care of Su Wan, and Chen Ji also revealed a little that someone would come to visit Su Wan in 2 days. This was taking someone's money to eliminate a disaster. Bai Mema naturally agreed to Chen Ji's words. After sending Chen Ji away, Bai Mema looked at the 500 taels of silver in her hand. It was painful and happy. This money was a good thing, but she didn't dare to embezzle it herself. Miss Su. When Bai Mema came to Su Wan's room, Su Wn was taking a nap after eating. Now, she was still living in the most dilapidated small room, but the bed was made of jade pillows and brocade blankets, but it was not worse than the bed of the imperial concubine. Bai Mema, what's the matter? Su Wn looked at Bai Mema with sleepy eyes. Bai Mema smiled and handed a banknote to Su Wn. Miss Su, this was sent by Chen Gonggong. Keep it well. Chen Ji sent it. Seeing the brand new 500 taels of silver, Su Wan's eyes flashed. Yang Yunyor raised the money so quickly. Who borrowed it from? Who taught her? Su Wan didn't believe that with Holy Mother Yang's character, she would borrow money so quickly and smoothly. Someone must have given her advice. Who was it? Yang Yuqing? Miss Su. Seeing Su Wan's complicated gaze without saying a word, Bai Mema hesitated and took the initiative to speak. At noon today, someone was sneaking around outside the gate of our Shinjaku courtyard. This old slave asked the servants who went in and out. That person seemed to be inquiring about you. This old slave has already told my subordinates not to reveal even a word about you. Oh. Hearing Bai Mema's words, Su Wan smiled. That sneaky person was naturally Wan Xin. She didn't think that she would really come. Su Wan didn't have the leisure to play tricks with her. Nanny, I'm naturally reassured by you. As she spoke, Su Wan raised her hand and lightly stuffed 500 taels of silver into Bai Mema's hand. Mema has worked hard these past few days. This silver is your hard work. As long as Mema does your best, I will naturally not treat Mema unfairly. Thank you, Miss Su. Bai Mema's tone was a little excited. Oh my, 500 taels. Even the beauties and nobles in the palace wouldn't be able to tip so much money at once. This Miss Su is not an ordinary person. This old slave is really lucky this time. Bai Mama happily came out of Su Wan's courtyard, and her mood was extremely beautiful. It's just that she didn't expect her fortune to be so strong today. As soon as she returned to the door of her room, Bai Mama saw a little eunuch of the Ministry of Internal Affairs standing in front of her door with a grin. Is it Bai Mama? This slave is Xiaoshunzi of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Xiaoshunzi smiled and handed a pouch to Bai Mama. Mama, today, this slave is here to distribute this month's supplies to the Shinjaku, and this. Xiaoshunzi took out an envelope from his arms, and along with the envelope, there was a silver banknote with a denomination of 100 taels. This is. Bai Mama's expression changed slightly. In fact, she already had a guess in her heart. Mama, did a new person come to the Shinjaku recently? Xiaoshunzi stuffed the letter and the banknote into the palm of Bai Mama's hand. This is what this official told me to give to that girl. Thank you, Bai Mama. There was no name on the envelope, nor was it for whom it was for, but Bai Mama listened to Xiaoshunzi's words and naturally knew that the letter was for Su Wan. Father-in-law, rest assured, this old slave knows what to do. Bai Mama exchanged a few more polite words with Xiaoshunzi and sent him out of the gate of the Shinjaku. Only then did Bai Mama sigh and return to Su Wan's room. At this time, Su Wan was a little surprised to see Bai Mama return. Mama, do you still have something else? Miss Su, this letter and the banknote are for you. Bai Mama handed the envelope and the banknote to Su Wan, but Su Wan just took out the letter with a little doubt and didn't take the banknote in her hand. Bai Mama remained calm, but the corners of her eyes and the tips of her eyebrows were full of joy. This letter is. Su Wan quickly opened the envelope. There was only one piece of paper inside, but the handwriting on it was very strong and powerful. Chen Shungbei. Su Wan saw that the inscription of the letter turned out to be Chen Shungbei's seal. For a moment, she was a little stunned. How could she forget this genuine male lead? It turned out that the news of the accident in the Shangfu Bureau had already spread out. In the original plot, Chen Shungbei and Su Wan should have officially recognized each other and then passed on their love. However, before Chen Shungbei could write a letter, the Shangfu Bureau had an accident. After hearing about the Shangfu Bureau in the guard camp, Chen Shungbei anxiously asked someone to inquire about it for 2 days before he found out that Su Wan had been sent to the Shinjaku. Fortunately, the Chen family was still quite wealthy. Chen Shungbei immediately took 100 taels of silver and wrote a letter in his own hand. He entrusted the people of the Ministry of Internal Affairs to bring the letter and the silver to the Shinjaku. To be able to take out 100 taels of silver at once, this person was quite considerate. Chen Shungbei's letter was very short. In the letter, he roughly talked about his current situation, and then said that he would find a way to save Su Wan and let her endure for a few more days. Putting away the letter, Su Wan leaned on the bed and narrowed her eyes. Now that the male and female leads are in place, the female supporting is ambitious, and the male supporting is also ready to take over at any time, then let's start acting. In the end, who can enlighten who? Will they fail and withdraw, or will the Holy Mother abandon the light for the dark? We will see the ending of this drama. Bai Mama. Su Wan's gaze fell on Bai Mama at some point. Hearing Su Wan's voice, Bai Mama immediately came forward with a smile. Miss Su, what instructions do you have? It is said that money makes the world go round. Now, Bai Mama has been completely bribed by Su Wan and follows her blindly. You find a way to inform Chen Ji and tell him that the day after tomorrow is a good opportunity. Let him bring people to see me. Su Wan needed to make a little preparation. She wanted to make herself as miserable as possible. She must give Holy Mother Yang a knowing blow, so that she would never forget for the rest of her life that her good sister had suffered and been offended for her. In this way, Su Wan would be able to sing better in the future. This old servant understands. Hearing Su Wan's instructions, Bai Mama immediately nodded her head vigorously. This matter is easy, she will definitely do it properly. Shangfu Bureau. When Chen Ji received the news sent by Bai Mama, he had just returned to the Shangfu Bureau. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Yang Yunuo and Xu Bingyu about to go out together. Chen Ji narrowed his red phoenix eyes and looked at Xu Bingyu. This little girl looked like a restless person at first glance. He didn't like it. Chen Gonggong. Yang Yunhuo and Xu Bingyu were about to go out with the brocade when they met Chen Ji at the door. The two people naturally immediately stepped forward and saluted respectfully. Yunhuo, come over here. Zijia has something to say to you. Chen Ji waved his hand at Yang Yunhuo, and Yang Yunhuo immediately ran over anxiously. Chen Gonggong, is there any change on Xiaowan's side? At this time, Yang Yunhuo couldn't help but think of Su Wan. She just sent the silver over at noon. The other side wouldn't change their minds so soon, right? It's about Su Wan, but it's a good thing. Chen Ji saw Yang Yunhuo's anxious appearance and didn't beat around the bush. He directly relayed Bai Mama's words to her. At noon the day after tomorrow, pack up and I will take you over. Really? Yang Yunhuo's eyes immediately lit up when she heard Chen Ji's words. Chen Gonggong, thank you so much, and can I bring 2 more people over? Hearing Yang Yunhuo's words, Chen Ji hesitated for a moment. He thought that Bai Mema didn't have any requirements for the number of people, and the Shinjuku was a dirty and messy place. Only people with mental problems would be willing to always run there, right? Bah, Chen Ji scolded in his heart. Stupid as hell. Didn't I always go there these days? His Majesty the Emperor, who also always ran there, was also shot. Wang Yi, shot +1. Okay. Chen Ji saw Yang Yunhuo's cautious appearance and couldn't help but wave his hand. Alas, he was too soft-hearted. Countless people who were stabbed in the back by Chen Ji. Why are you so soft-hearted, Tilda? Chapter 171. It was noon, and the weather was warm. Yang Yunhuo, Xu Bingyu, and Yang Yuqing, who had already made an appointment, followed Chen Ji and hurriedly came to the courtyard gate of Shinjuku. Because Bai Mema had an appointment with Chen Ji, she was standing outside the courtyard gate and waiting for a long time. Mema. Chen Ji flicked his horsetail whisk and smiled charmingly at Bai Mema. These girls are Su Wan's little sisters. It's okay to let them go in and take a look, right? Ari, this was originally not allowed. Bai Mema pretended to show an embarrassed expression. However, since Chen Gonggong has spoken, this old slave will naturally give you face. There are not many people in the courtyard now, and Su Wan has just returned. You can go in and see her. Remember to be quick. As she spoke, Bai Mema waved her hand and summoned a servant of Shinjuku. Yu Mai, take them to see Su Wan. Yu Mai was Bai Mema's confidant. When she heard Bai Mema's words, she immediately stepped forward respectfully. Elder sisters, come with me. According to age, Yu Mai was several years older than Yang Yunhuo and the others, but the harem was a place that paid great attention to rank and status. In front of high-level palace maids like them, the people of Shinjuku had to respectfully address each other as elder sister. Because Su Wan lived in the innermost place, Yu Mai took everyone through almost half of Shinjuku's courtyard. Looking at the haggard palace maids in the courtyard, Yang Yuqing and Xu Bingyu both frowned, and Yang Yunhuo's face flashed with discomfort. Miss Yu Mai, what does Su Wan do in Shinjuku? Is it hard? Yang Yunhuo couldn't help but inquire about Su Wan's recent situation. She was eager to know how Su Wan was doing here. When she heard Yang Yunhuo's words, Yu Mai just smiled bitterly. This elder sister, what we do in Shinjuku is the most lowly and laborious work. The newcomers are generally pouring night incense, cleaning the toilets of the 3rd hall, or cleaning the weeds of the 6th hall. In short, their lives are cheap. How can they be qualified to say that it's hard? Hearing Yu Mai's words, Yang Yunhuo's entire face turned pale. Yang Yuqing and Xu Bingyu looked at each other, and they subconsciously shuddered. This Shinjuku is really not a place for people to stay. We're here. At this time, Yu Mai's footsteps stopped in front of a dilapidated house. This is where Su Wan lives. She came last and can only live in the farthest and worst room. You guys better be mentally prepared before going in. With that, Yu Mai took a deep look at the 3 of them, then shook her head and turned to leave. Sister. Looking at the dilapidated wooden door, Yang Yuqing subconsciously pulled Yang Yunhuo's sleeve. Yang Yunhuo also took a deep breath and stepped forward to push open the wooden door, creak. As the wooden door opened, a cloud of choking dust splashed out. Cough, Xu Bingyu, who was standing on the far right, choked on the dust and couldn't help but cough. Her coughing alarmed the people in the room. Sister Junior, why are you here? The entire room was very narrow. Other than an old wooden bed leaning against the wall, there was only a teetering wooden table and a chair that was missing a corner. At this time, Sue Wan was sitting on the wooden bed and lowering her head to apply medicine on herself. Hearing the movement at the door, she raised her head and looked at the three people at the door with great surprise. Xiao Wan. Facing Sue Wan's gaze, Yang Junior's eyes immediately turned red. How could the Sue Wan in front of her still have the delicate and healthy appearance from a few days ago? At this time, she was wearing a shabby and thin coarse slave uniform, her long hair was slightly dry and messy, and her originally fair little face was now waxy yellow. Xiao Wan, what happened to your arm? Yang Junior's gaze fell from Sue Wan's face to her body, and only then did she realize that there was a long bloodstain on her arm. At this time, the blood from the wound had begun to coagulate. Seeing such a long wound, Yang Junior immediately screamed, and Shu Bingyu behind her even turned her face to the side timidly. Don't worry. Sue Wan was very satisfied with Yang Junior's performance. She smiled weakly at Yang Junior. This was accidentally scratched when I was working in the morning. It's nothing. I've often been injured these days, so I'll slowly get used to it. As she spoke, Sue Wan once again poured all the Jinchuang medicine powder in her hand onto her wound. The piercing pain in that instant made her face deathly pale and a layer of fine sweat immediately seeped out of her forehead. Xiao Wan, let me help you apply the medicine. Yang Junior saw that it was really inconvenient for Sue Wan to apply the medicine by herself. She couldn't help but say as she quickly stepped forward. Yang Yuqing and Shu Bingyu behind her also looked at each other and followed her to the bed. The three people busily helped Sue Wan treat the wound. Yang Yuqing took out a clean handkerchief from her arms and helped Sue Wan bandage her arm. After doing all this, Yang Junior couldn't help but sit by the bed and take Sue Wan's hand. Xiao Wan, I'm sorry. You suffered so much because of me. Don't worry, I will find a way to save you. I will definitely save you. Sister Junior, I believe you. You are like my sister. In this harem, you are my dearest person, and Yuqing. Sue Wan's gaze slowly fell on Yang Yuqing and Shu Bingyu. Yuqing and Bingyu are also good people. I'm really happy to know you sisters. Sister Xiao Wan, this is what we should do. Without waiting for Yang Yuqing to speak, Shu Bingyu stepped forward and grabbed Sue Wan's other hand. Although I'm just a little palace maid of the Shangfu Bureau now, Sister Xiao Wan, I will find a way to save you with Sister Junior. You must wait for us. After listening to Shu Bingyu's words, Sue Wan's eyes flashed and she nodded firmly. Yang Yuqing, who had been silent, moved her lips several times. Because Shu Bingyu always snatched the right to speak, she had to stand at the back sullenly and look at Shu Bingyu with a complicated gaze. The four sisters didn't chat for too long before Bai Mama sent someone to call Sue Wan to continue working. Seeing Sue Wan's thin body staggering while carrying a thick wooden bucket, her figure became more and more deeply engraved in Yang Junior's heart. The so-called true sisters are like this. They can do anything for you and treat you with sincerity. Xiao Wan, in this life, I, Yang Junior, will remember your kindness and remember that you are my sister. In her heart, she secretly vowed to repay Sue Wan. When Yang Junior left, her eyes became particularly firm. She will think of a way, she will definitely think of a way. After Yang Junior and the others left, Sue Wan returned to her room again. The heavy wooden bucket had long been taken away by Yu Mai. Bai Mama looked at the wound on Sue Wan's body that was still oozing blood and couldn't help but frown. Miss Sue, do you want to find someone to call Steward Wang over? In the eyes of Bai Mama, this Miss Sue was not a golden branch or jade leaf, but she was more precious than that. Such a person with such status would cut a knife on her body just like that. It was the first time Bai Mama had seen a woman who was so ruthless to herself. There were many women in the harem who knew how to play tricks, but most of them would cry, make a fuss, or try to frame others. How many people were willing to use their own bodies to make a fuss? Their bodies were very precious. Don't call Wang Yi. Bai Mama, you can go to the Imperial Hospital and help me get some painkillers. Sue Wan looked down at the wound on her arm. The wound was very long, and because there was a lot of blood, it looked very scary. In fact, the wound wasn't too deep. When Sue WN made her move, she also calculated the aim. In addition to the strong visual impact of bleeding, such a wound would only leave a very long and ugly scar. Sue WAN wanted to use this scar to constantly remind Yang Yunuo of what she had endured for her, and with Yang Yunuo's saintly character, she would never be able to escape from the palm of her hand in this life. Chapter 172. At night, when Su Rui came to the courtyard of the Shinjaku on time again, Sue WAN didn't wait for him for the first time and slept alone with her clothes on. The simple and crude bed was covered with a delicate brocade quilt. Sue WAN was curled up and lying on it, her whole body wrapped in the brocade quilt. Wife. Su Rui leaned over the bed and gently called Sue WAN. The person on the bed did not respond. Was it because she was too tired and slept like a log? Su Rui raised his hand and gently stroked Su Wan's hair, then gently leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. Go to sleep. After dropping this sentence, he turned around, opened the dilapidated window, and disappeared in a flash. After Su Rui left, Sue WAN slowly opened her eyes. She sighed, stretched out her arm from the quilt, and her eyes fell on her wound. In the evening, she deliberately told Bai Mema to light sandalwood incense in the room, and Sue WAN deliberately did not change the dressing after dinner. Su Rui was too keen. Sue WAN was afraid that he would find out about her injury, so she could only use this trick. She didn't want him to worry and feel sorry for her. This small injury really didn't matter to her. From under the pillow, Sue WN dug out the medicinal powder that Bai Mema brought back from the Imperial Hospital. She carefully took off her robe, revealing her injured arm. At this time, the wound had stopped bleeding, and the handkerchief used to bandage the wound had been changed in the afternoon. Sue WN gritted her teeth and used her other hand to gently and attentively untie the white cloth wrapped around the wound. At this moment, her wrist was suddenly grabbed by someone. Sue WAN was startled and raised her eyes in panic to meet Su Rui's bottomless eyes. You want to lie to me? Sue WAN, you're still too inexperienced. Even though the room was full of the smell of sandalwood, it still couldn't cover up the smell of blood on her body. And just before leaving, Su Rui deliberately leaned over and kissed Sue WAN. The matter of hiding Jinchuang medicine under her pillow was immediately discovered by Su Rui. He pretended that he didn't notice anything and left in order to catch her and hide her alone. Seeing that she couldn't hide it from Su Rui, Sue WN could only smile bitterly at him. You're really too keen, I can't deceive you. Su Rui didn't speak. He silently took the Jinchuang medicine beside Sue WN, lowered his eyes, and skillfully and carefully helped her change the medicine powder on the wound. Don't do it again. After doing all this, Su Rui lifted his head, his profound gaze fixated on Su Wan's eyes. As long as I'm here, I won't allow anyone to hurt you. I can't and you can't either. Because you don't just belong to you, you're also mine. Before he finished speaking, Su Rui had already lowered his head and fiercely kissed Su Wan's lips. Sue WAN didn't move, letting Su Rui's overwhelming kisses hit her. Su Rui's kiss didn't last too long. There were sounds of footsteps and breathing outside the door. Su Rui's gaze darkened and he pulled the robe at the side and wrapped Su WN inside. Who is it? Get in here. Clang. Outside the wooden door, there was the sound of something falling to the ground. Then, Bai Mema's face turned pale. She rolled in. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Bai Mema's small body rolled directly to the front of the bed. Looking at the man sitting on it, she trembled and moved back, greeting Su Rui with a frightened and uneasy voice. In the evening, Bai Mema planned to help Su WN apply the medicine, but in the end, she was refused by Su WAN. She said she would apply it before going to bed at night. As the saying goes, eat the king's salary and bear the king's worries. Bai Mema took so much money from Su WAN and naturally wanted to perform well, so she took advantage of the night to prepare some things to change the medicine and planned to come over to help. Who knew that outside the door, through the gap in the wooden door, she would see a man on Su Wan's bed being intimate with her. At that moment, Bai Mema's breathing became disorderly. She suddenly remembered that Steward Wang said that this Miss Su's identity was not ordinary, so who would be the man who came to meet her in the middle of the night? Bai Mama didn't dare to think and was about to turn around and sneak away. Who knew that at this time, the man on the bed suddenly turned around and shouted coldly. Seeing the man's face, Bai Mama was so scared that she peed her pant. His Majesty, that was His Majesty. As a result, the miserable Bai Mama was so scared that her whole body went limp and she could only obediently roll in tilde at this time. Bai Mama, who was kneeling on the ground, had mixed feelings in her heart. No wonder Steward Wang was so polite to this Miss Su. It turned out that her backer was the emperor. Fortunately, she had been conscientious these days and did not neglect this great aunt. But she seemed to have seen something she shouldn't have seen. Will she be silenced and dismembered by 5 horses? Seeing Bai Mema on the ground being scared by His Majesty, Su Wn couldn't help but tug at Su Rui's sleeve. Your Majesty, this is Bai Mema of Shinjaku. These days, this slave has been here thanks to her care. Oh, is that so? Su Rui raised his eyebrows. When he heard Su Wn mention Bai Mema's identity, the coldness in his eyes immediately dissipated a lot. It's so late, what are you doing here? Replying to your Majesty, this old slave came to see Miss Su. For her injury. Bai Mema's voice was still very frightened. Seeing that she was still holding the white cloth used to bandage the wound in her hand, Su Rui believed her words. Mama, you are really considerate, but Jun has personally bandaged Xiaowan's wound. You can leave. Also, from today onwards, after nightfall, no one in Shinjaku is allowed to approach this place without authorization. Mama, do you hear me clearly? Yes, yes. This old slave will obey your Majesty's decree, please rest assured. This old slave knows what to do, this old slave will leave now. While speaking, Bai Mema had already turned around, trembling, and scrambled to escape. Seeing that Bai Mema had gone far away, Su Rui turned around and looked at Su Wn with a serious face. You are injured, how can you rest well here? I will take you to the Zhonggong. No one dares to approach that place on weekdays. You go there to recuperate for a few more days and recover from your injury. I will tell Wang Yi to take care of the Shinjaku, and it will not delay your plan. Seeing Su Rui say this, Su Wn thought about it and simply nodded. It just so happened that she needed Wang Yi to help her investigate the details of Xu Bingyu in the next few days, that Xu Bingyu was not a simple girl. Then let's go. Seeing Su Wn nod, Su Rui immediately smiled. He pulled up the brocade quilt on the wooden bed and wrapped Su Wan's whole body in it. I will carry you back, you should rest well for me now. Yes, Your Majesty. Su Wan's whole body was tightly wrapped in Su Rui's arms. She looked up and could only see Su Rui's streamlined and beautiful chin. In the night, Su Rui's figure sneaked like a ghost. The guards of the entire imperial city were practically non-existent to him. Because she was wrapped in the brocade quilt, Su Wn could not feel the coldness of the autumn night. Leaning on Su Rui's chest, thinking of his order to rest well, Su Wan finally closed her eyes with peace of mind. Central Palace, Chenkuan Palace. Ever since Su Rui came to this world, there were no palace maids serving in the Central Palace. Usually, all the affairs of the Central Palace were directly arranged by Wang Yi's capable servants to complete. After putting Su Wn on the dragon couch and watching her sleep, Su Rui then summoned Wang Yi over and had him remove the servants in the warm room and bedroom for the next few days. These few days, only Wang Yi was left to serve in these 2 places. Although the servants in the Central Palace were 100% reliable people, Su Rui did not want others to destroy his and Su Wan's world of 2 people. The reason why he left Wang Yi behind was just to leave someone who could pass on a message. Hearing Su Rui's instructions, Wang Yi naturally nodded and did as he said. Your Majesty, Miss Su these few days. Wang Yi originally wanted to ask if he wanted to find someone to take care of Su Wan these few days. Who knew that before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Su Rui. Oh right, Wang Yi, go to the Imperial Hospital tomorrow morning and help me bring the best medicine from the Imperial Hospital. You have to do this carefully and don't let others suspect you. This servant understands. Chapter 173. The weather at the end of October, an autumn rain and a cold wind. Su Wan leaned on the soft couch in the side study of the warm room. She flipped through Xu Bingyue's travel guide card that Wang Yi found for her with one hand. The card recorded Xu Bingyue's birthplace, life experience, and family situation in detail. This girl turned out to be a concubine's child like Yang Yuqing, but she was very favored at home, and it was Xu Bingyu who took the initiative to enter the palace this time. It could be seen how dissatisfied and ambitious this girl was with the current situation. Su Wan's eyes flashed. Originally, she planned to use Yang Yuqing to be the vicious female supporting character, but now, it seemed that Xu Bingyu was more suitable. According to the plot of the original world, by this time, Yang Yuqing should have long been moved by His Majesty and wholeheartedly wanted to step on Liu Guiren to fly up the branch. In contrast, Xu Bingyu, who appeared halfway, was more malleable. Su Wan closed the name card and looked at Xu Bingyue's movements in the past 2 days that Wang Yi had specially found someone to record. She was now closely following Yang Yunuo's footsteps and would go to the Imperial Hospital every few days to make her presence known in front of Lu Mushuan. It seemed that Yang Yunuo was able to settle the 500 silver taels so quickly because Xu Bingyu instigated her to borrow it from Lu Mushuan. In this way, Yang Yunuo's urgent need was solved and Xu Bingyu had many opportunities to enter the Imperial Hospital to get close to Lu Mushuan. This woman's scheming was not ordinary, but the more such a person was, the more Su Wan liked her. Unknowingly, Su Wan had finished looking through Xu Bingyue's daily whereabouts in recent days. She raised her hand and was about to close the file when she suddenly felt a warmth on her back and a heavy and embroidered cloak was gently draped over her back. Steward Wang, Su Wan thought that Wang Yi, who had been serving on the side, had helped her put it on, but as soon as she looked up, she saw Su Rui's smiling eyes. It turned out that Wang Yi had already disappeared, and Su Rui, dressed in a dragon robe, was standing behind her. "Be careful not to catch a cold," Su Rui said while picking up the file by Su Wan's hand. "Your arm hasn't recovered yet, don't carry such heavy things." Su Wan. General Su, can you tell me what of the world is light in your eyes? Feathers. Xu Bingyu. After putting the cloak on Su Wan, Su Rui casually picked up the file that Su Wan had just read and quickly glanced at it. Who is this Xu Bingyu? There was no Xu Bingyu in the storyline mission that Su Rui accepted. That's right, she was a passerby who had nothing to do with the main storyline. In the original plot, on the night that Su Wan and Yang Yunuo were punished by Empress Xu, because Su Wan fainted in the middle of the night, Yang Yunuo hugged her and knocked on the palace door for most of the day. In the end, Yang Yunuo begged in front of Empress Xu, and Empress Xu magnanimously pardoned their crimes. Later, Yang Yunuo brought the unconscious Su Wan back to the Shangfu Bureau and took care of Su Wan in the side room where they lived for most of the night before she woke up. Therefore, in the original plot, they didn't last until dawn, and they didn't meet Xu Bingyu who was cleaning the royal road. But now, because of Su Wan's arrival, everything has changed. While Su Wan changed her and Yang Yunuo's fate, she also changed the fate of too many people, such as Xu Bingyu, Bai Mama, and others. Of course, Su Wan's classmates' things are trivial. Our General Su directly sent 2 concubines and a large group of people to the Yellow Springs Road. That's a big move. I think this Xu Bingyu can be used, she has great use. Su Wan tightened the cloak on her body and looked up at Su Rui with a smile. What do you think? It's good that you like it. Su Rui liked to see Su Wan toss and turn. He liked it no matter how she tossed and turned. Of course, if he encountered some accident that Su Wan couldn't toss, then General Su would not hesitate to make a move. Ruthlessly destroying a flower and what not was completely trivial. Then I'll start the next step, Su Wan said and took out Chen Shungbei's letter from the brocade bag she carried with her. I'm going to reply to Chen Shungbei and then create some opportunities for him and Xu Bingyu. Hearing Su Wan mention Chen Shungbei, Su Rui's eyes flashed slightly. I have approved the memorial for Chen Shungbei's promotion. He has been very proud of himself these days. But no matter how nice Chen Shungbei sounds right now, he is only the captain of the Imperial Guards. I don't think that Xu Bingyu will necessarily like him. That's not true. Su Wan shook her head and the smile on her face became more intense. The reason why the male lead of a world is called the male lead is naturally because he has his own excellence. Although I have never seen Chen Shungbei, according to the original plot, he is a handsome and extraordinary young man with an imposing appearance. Compared with Lu Mushuan's gentleness and elegance, such a man is more likely to attract women. Handsome and extraordinary, imposing appearance. Hearing Su Wn praise Chen Shungbei like a flower, General Su couldn't help but lower his eyes. So what if he is the male lead? Isn't he still at our mercy? If we want him to live, he will live. If we want him to die, he will die. Yes, of course, Your Majesty, you are the most powerful. Your Majesty, you have already broken through the sky. Su Wan looked at Su Rui with a smile. When she said these words, she didn't feel guilty at all. That's right. Our family's men are so greasy that they don't want to. Hearing Su Wan's praise, Su Rui couldn't help but raise the corner of his lips. Xiao Wn, look at your arm, it's so troublesome to write. I'll help you reply to Chen Shungbei. It's settled. While speaking, without waiting for Su Wn to agree, Su Rui had already walked to the desk on the side and spread out a piece of paper. Wang Yi, come and grind the ink for Zhen. Yes. Wang Yi's voice came from afar. After a while, he quickly walked to the desk and skillfully helped Su Rui grind the ink. Other people's emperors have beautiful women around them, but our family's emperor only has a middle-aged uncle. Chief Steward Wang Tilda. The next morning, as usual, Xu Bingyu would go to the Shanggong Bureau every morning according to Liao Xi's instructions to see if there were any newly dyed silks and satins there. The Shanggong Bureau was not far from the Shangfu Bureau. After walking through a secluded path, she could see their courtyard. Xu Bingyu had long been familiar with this road. Usually, no one would pass by here at this time, but today, when Xu Bingyu passed the path, she bumped into a little eunuch who was hurrying along. Seeing that the other party was wearing the uniform of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Xu Bingyu didn't dare to argue with the other party. The little eunuch seemed to be in a hurry and disappeared in the blink of an eye. What bad luck! Xu Bingyu rubbed her shoulder that was hurting from the collision. The moment she looked down, she saw a brand new letter on the ground. This is. She hesitated to pick up the letter. There was a line of words written on it: Imperial Army North Camp, Chen Shungbei. Chen Shungbei? This name sounds nice, and the handwriting on the letter is also very beautiful. Who wrote this letter? Looking at the direction of the little eunuch from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, this letter should have come from the harem. The harem forbids all palace maids and guards from coming and going. If it wasn't a palace maid. Xu Bingyue's hands were trembling. She composed herself, walked to the corner of the path and looked around. Seeing that the little eunuch from the Ministry of Internal Affairs did not come back, Xu Bingyu took a deep breath and carefully opened the letter. Life is like this. It is very likely that it will be completely changed because of a person we meet at a certain moment or a decision we make. Xu Bingyu, as Su Wn expected, opened the letter because she was ambitious and scheming. If the person who picked up this letter was changed to Yang Yunuo, I'm afraid that Yang Yunuo would foolishly stand in place and wait for the owner to find her. If she couldn't wait for the owner, she would try her best to find the owner. Of course, if Su Wan encountered such a thing, she would probably turn a blind eye to such a letter. Chapter 174. Imperial City Imperial Guard, North Guard Camp. In everyone's eyes, Chen Shungbei, who had just been promoted to the head of the Imperial Guards, was flushed with success these days. He was recognized by his boss and His Majesty at such a young age. His future was simply limitless. However, surrounded by everyone's envious, jealous, and hateful eyes, Chen Shungbei maintained his indifference on the surface. In fact, he was actually very annoyed in his heart. Ever since he entrusted Xiao Shunzi of the Ministry of Internal Affairs to send the money and the letter to Su Wan, there had been no news from the Shinjaku. Chen Shungbei was absent-minded all day. In his memory, Su Wan was still the same as she was many years ago, a small, white, and clean girl who liked to chase after him and call him Big Brother Shungbei, Big Brother Shungbei. At that time, he knew that Su Wan was his future wife. Although he was only a little more than 2 years older than her, Chen Shungbei already had the heart of a little man at that time and knew that he had to protect her for a lifetime. Unfortunately, when he was 9 years old, the Su family moved away because of the family's decline. Since then, There had been no news and the two families had lost contact. In the past few years, Chen Shungbei had never forgotten the little girl with clear eyes in his memory. Occasionally in his dreams at midnight, he could always hear a tender and pleasant voice constantly calling Big Brother Shungbei. After Chen Shungbei was recommended to the court by his father at the age of 16, many people in the capital came to his door to matchmake, but they were all rejected by Chen Shungbei. Although he knew that the chance of meeting Su Wan again in the vast sea of people was very small, Chen Shungbei still didn't want to give up. The capital could be said to be very big, but it could also be said to be very small. He always looked forward to one day being able to reunite with that girl on the street. This was a scene that Chen Shungbei had imagined countless times. As a result, not long ago, when he was inspecting the palace, he really saw Su Wan again. She was following a group of palace maids, wearing the aqua blue palace dress of the Shangfu Bureau. On her waist hung the jade pendant that she had never left since she was a child. The jade pendant was originally a pair and was a token of engagement between their two families. Although it was only a glance, Chen Shungbei immediately recognized that it was his little sister Xiao Wan. She still had a pair of clear and beautiful eyes. He would never mistake her. At that time, Chen Shungbei's heart was particularly happy, but because of each other's identities, he couldn't immediately come forward to acknowledge each other. However, in the vast sea of people, he finally found Su Wan. Was this what other people called fate? Chen Shungbei thought that the reunion between the two would come soon, but the news of the Shangfu Bureau's accident followed. Sigh. Chen Shungbei sighed in his heart again. At this time, a familiar figure walked in quickly. Captain Chen. Seeing Chen Shungbei's face, the man smiled and squeezed his eyes. Captain Chen, someone is looking for you. Chen Shungbei was taken aback. He instinctively thought that it was Xiao Shunzi from the Department of Internal Affairs. His complexion changed slightly and he immediately got up. Seeing him so anxious, the person who came to report couldn't help but pull his arm and said with an ambiguous expression, Captain Chen, although this is the front palace guard camp, it is also the inner court of the imperial city. You should be careful when you come and go. Don't get caught. Hearing the other party's words, Chen Shungbei was confused. When he quickly walked out of the guard camp's lounge, he was stunned when he saw the fair-faced woman wearing a servant's uniform in the courtyard. Miss, you are looking for me. Although the other party was a woman disguised as a man, it could be seen at a glance, okay? Of course, in the imperial city, sometimes people would pretend not to see it even if they saw it, and pretend not to be able to guess it even if they guessed it. Who made this place to be the imperial city? The noon sun was shining brightly. The bright sunlight shone on Chen Shungbei's handsome face. He was wearing a royal blue guard uniform, carrying a sword, and a jade crown to tie his hair. His whole person looked extremely heroic and vigorous. Especially the tone of his voice at the moment, the charming voice made people feel particularly comfortable listening to it. Before seeing Chen Shungbei, Xu Bingyu always felt that a man like Imperial Physician Lu was already very good-looking, but seeing the heroic Chen Shungbei, Xu Bingyu's heartbeat immediately accelerated. This was the feeling of falling in love at first sight. Love at first sight, heart beating like a deer. You are Chen Shungbei, Big Brother Chen? Xu Bingyu restrained the light in her eyes and looked at Chen Shungbei with an innocent and shy face, her voice weak and mellow. I am Chen Shungbei. May I ask who you are? I am Su Wan's good sister, Xu Bingyu. Big Brother Chen, you can call me Bingyu. Xu Bingyu smiled brightly at Chen Shungbei. When she opened the letter in the morning, she found that the letter was actually written by Su Wan. Xu Bingyu only thought that this matter was too coincidental at the time, but after reading the contents of the letter, she learned that Su Wan's fiancé turned out to be the head guard of the Imperial Guard camp. Moreover, looking at the tone of Su Wan's correspondence with him, this person seemed to have a very good family background and had a lot of room for promotion. At that time, Xu Bingyu couldn't help but start to plan. If she helped Su Wan deliver this letter, then she would help two people pass a message. Maybe one day when Su Wan came out of the Shinjaku and counterattacked, or this man was promoted, she would be able to get some benefits from them. That's right, Xu Bingyu appeared here with this idea in mind. According to common sense, palace maids couldn't have too close contact with the guards, and the people of the Shangfu Bureau didn't have the time and courage to come here directly. In the original plot, Su Wan and Yang Yunuo asked the courageous Yang Yuqing to deliver the letter, but now Xu Bingyu directly changed into an inner maid's uniform and dared to come directly to the guard camp. This woman's boldness was evident. "You are Xiao Wan's sister. Did she ask you to find me?" When Chen Shengbei heard Xu Bingyue's words at this time, his tone was very excited. "Is she okay? Did she write back to me? The letter is here." Xu Bingyu reluctantly took the letter out of her arms and handed it to Chen Shengbei with a smile. "Big brother Chen, you can read it slowly. I will come back in 2 days when I have time. If you have anything to say to Sister Xiao Wan, you can write it down and I will hand it to her for you." "Really, thank you so much." Hearing Xu Bingyue's words, Chen Shengbei couldn't help but smile gratefully at her. This smile was gentle and charming, making Xu Bingyue's mind sway. "Such a perfect man. It's really a pity to be together with Su Wan." Although she was already moved by Chen Shengbei in her heart, Xu Bingyu didn't show it too obviously on the surface. "Big brother Chen, I have already taken a big risk coming here. I am going back now. Let's meet again in 2 days. En." Hearing Xu Bingyu say this, Chen Shengbei's eyes flashed. He also thought that Xu Bingyue's trip was indeed not small. After pondering for a while, Chen Shengbei handed a token to Xu Bingyu. "This is the North Camp's access token. With this thing, it will be more convenient for you to come here next time. At least, no one in the camp will make things difficult for you." "Big brother Chen, is this for me?" Xu Bingyue's eyes sparkled as she took the token handed over by Chen Shengbei. When her fingertips touched his slender and warm big hand, she immediately retracted her hand as if she had been electrocuted. "Big brother Chen gave it to me, I will keep it well. Then I will leave first." Xu Bingyu looked at Chen Shengbei reluctantly, but the man in front of her was staring at the handwriting on the letter in a daze, as if he was completely fascinated by it. Xu Bingyu secretly gritted her teeth and turned to leave with a displeased expression. Chen Shengbei was not aware of Xu Bingyue's departure. He just stared blankly at the smooth and flowing handwriting, his whole person feeling joy from the bottom of his heart. This was written to him by Xiao Wan. Xiao Wan's handwriting was really too beautiful. The words were like the person, causing Chen Shengbei's eyes to soften. Speaking of which, those floating words seemed to be written by His Majesty the Emperor. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.